All right.
Good evening. I'd like to call the regular meeting in Narragansett Planning Board to order April 18th, 2023. Mr. Friday. Mr. Brady. Here. Dr. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Fleming, I'm here. Mr. Brunetto is absent with cause. So first item on the agenda, just remind the folks that we are on YouTube Live. So if everybody could respect when other people are speaking, one at a time, and try to keep the background noise down as much as possible, because apparently it gets picked up by the television. First item is the approval of minutes. Consent agenda for March 21st and March 28th minutes. Does anyone have any additions or edits, Mr. Friday?
Yeah, so the March 21st minutes, I thought there were two things that would be good to add to it that were missing. One is ask Mr. Marcella to clarify that for the record, that the road is not the town's property.
Which page is this?
It's on page 3, I'm sorry. Site review for Richards.
How far down the page? Where is that?
So it's just missing, so it could be after,
Well, the minutes are a reflection of what was said. Was that said that night?
yes, it was.
Oh, okay.
Where are you looking, sir?
On page 3, it could be after the section for Mr. Brady.
Second paragraph, first paragraph, M. Brady expressed?
Yeah, it could be after
Okay,
that, could be
all right,
after that.
Okay.
Yep.
What did you want noted?
Clarified with Mr. Marcello that the road is not the town property. It's not town road, because parts of the report we got indicated that it was a town road, so.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, anything else?
And we can take them both together, right? One, two, two?
You could take them both together with that change to that one if you want.
Yeah, so moved. I didn't see anything else. Did you guys see anything second? No, okay.
So
moved.
Dr. O'Neill's motioning to accept both minutes with that one change. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Brady. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. 4-0, thank you. Next item is a site review. It's continued Richards, Plat A, Lot 114 and 115, Marble Road. We took all the testimony, all the information in this. My recollection, Mr. Landry, is that we continued this because there was some indication that the attorneys, you and attorney for some neighbors, may get together and come up with some alternatives or some accommodations. And if that hasn't occurred, then I think we're going to move quickly to a decision. So can you tell me if that occurred?
So I have not spoken to Mr. Gary. My client spoke to the neighbor, and really the biggest part of this, for the record, Attorney Matt Landry on behalf of Steve and Nancy Richards. What we were trying to do is seek out an opportunity to move that wet swale that's
Right.
along the northern portion of Marble Road to the other side of the road. And we thought that would be an easy in-kind exchange. And, you know, I reserved that comment at the last meeting because I wasn't sure if that was possible, and that Principe's office would have to investigate that. We did look at that, and unfortunately, it's not as simple as just moving it to the other side of the road. There is extensive engineering that would need to take place, new drainage calculations, new design, upwards of several $1,000s to do that. It would require additional review by the town, more months of delay, and it's just really not feasible, unfortunately.
Okay.
So it's not a practical solution. The only other alternative was a potential easement or land swap. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, that was discussed over a year ago, and the parties could never come
Didn't happen.
to fruition, and I don't see that even being possible now.
So we're not any different than where we are last time.
We're really not, and I have
Okay.
nothing else to add. I just want to note for the record that we did look into that wet swale issue and see if we can move it to the other side of the road. It's just not financially practical. And with the time delay, there's just really no possibility
Well,
of doing it.
that being the case, what I'd like to do is, we've taken all the public testimony, you know, the neighbors and whatever. If Mr. Garrity wants 2 minutes to sum up, and then Mr. Landry, you can come back and take 2 minutes to sum up, and then the board will make a decision. This has got to go to zoning, as you know, and then CRMC's got to get involved too, so it's just a step.
Information. One of the things that I had asked was protection for lots A111 and A110 on the backside. I talked to your engineer about that, and you folks said that you are willing to do that. Was anything ever done in that? I haven't seen anything come back in any of our materials that updated it.
The plans have not been updated, but he is looking into that. And as you know, the state does not allow us to increase any runoff onto neighboring parcels. So, you know, the state is going to look at that and make sure that's not a possibility. But to the extent we need anything additional, it was taken under advisement by Mr. Principe, but he has not submitted or supplemented the plans with anything else.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back to you in a second. Mr. Gary, a couple minutes to sum up. We got a long night tonight.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, John Garrahy on behalf of several neighbors, abutters on this property, and I will be quick. Let me just make one point. There was, you know, we're trying to work with them in order to make this happen, not so it doesn't happen. There was a plan submitted several years ago, which I understand was approved by the zoning board, and a copy of the plan I have received, which shows the swale on the other side of the street, which somebody else evidently thought was a good idea at the time. So my client tried to make that happen. Evidently, it costs too much to accomplish this, so there's no agreement with respect to moving the swale on that property. The other point I want to make is that I think that this application is misclassified. This is an amendment to a subdivision. This doesn't have to do with the property. It has to do with the subdivision of Star Drive. And although it was done a long time ago, this action is more than just a recommendation to the zoning board as a site plan review. I would suggest to you that because there is a change in the site plan which requires a variance under your rules, that requires an amendment to the plan, which is a major change, which requires you to examine it in that context and not just a recommendation to the zoning board. I would also say that in order for a private road to be able to have access to a property, this board has to approve that. So in the best case, this is an error of the open meetings because it doesn't describe those actions. It doesn't appear to me that you're prepared to take those actions because a major change to an amended site plan requires a review and public notice and public hearing. This is a significant change. The neighborhood has a right to notice of it. This has no notice. People don't know about these things. We know about it now, however, and I would suggest to you that it's misclassified on your agenda.
Mr. Marcella?
As I always say, I would appreciate if Mr. Garrett would call me and answer this. But why don't I have Mr. answer that, and then I'll answer.
Yeah, if we could get your view after that.
Well, respectfully, that's a gross mischaracterization of what is happening here. And I'm sure, well, I would hope Mr. Marcello would agree. This is not a modification or amendment to a subdivision plat. It's a recorded plat with a road that exists on that plat. We're simply developing that road to access a lot that already exists on the plat. A major change to a subdivision plat that exists is you're altering or modifying the original intent of a plan, and it constitutes some major change, and it's not consistent with what the original intent was with that filing. We're not changing it. We're actually developing the road, and that was the intent of the plat when it was recorded, is that all the roads and streets that are listed thereon would be improved and used for the lots within the subdivision. We're improving that. My client has a lot that exists on Marble Road. He has the right to improve that road at his expense, along with the rights of anyone else on that plat to improve that road. He cannot restrict anyone's right to access Marble Road, and I've made that clear, and we acknowledge that. We're not restricting that access. We've made every effort to make that road public, as you well know, and we were unable to do that and get approval by DPW. and the town to sign off on that. So it's going to remain a private street, subject to a maintenance agreement by Mr. Richards at his expense. He's going to approve it at his expense. And this road is going to be subject to town approval by DPW, and that we sign off on the proper road improvement application, whatever it's entitled. So I completely disagree that this is a major change to subdivision plat. It has nothing to do with that. This is an advisory opinion on a zoning application for a frontage variance. That's it. It's
All right,
nothing else.
let me go to Mr. Marcel.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, right now, all this board is doing is advising the zoning board on a variance application. I don't see, there's no change in lot lines. I think the ultimate interest of the neighbors comes in regarding their interest in the road, because they have interest in the subdivision and who's going to sign off on the CRMC application, et cetera, et cetera. So the interests of the neighbors certainly come into play there. But the issue before us is just, again, a zoning variance relief for frontage. And I don't believe it is a major subdivision or an amendment to the subdivision or any other action like that. And obviously, Mr. Gary, you can make that argument at the zoning board, where everyone will get notice within the certain radius. But for the board's decision tonight, it's, my opinion, that it's not a major subdivision or open to the subdivision regulations.
All right, thanks. Mr. Gary, do you have anything else? No, don't belabor that, because we got our answer.
No, I will not prolong it, but it is, and I've got another application that's going to come before you, which is a private road, which needs your approval in order for a private road to provide the frontage. That's clear in your regulations. So that's at least one aspect that this board has to take that doesn't have in front of it. And I do say that a major change, and I'll just read you your regulations. Changes would be contrary to any applicable provision of the zoning ordinance, or which requires a variance or special use permit from the zoning board, or changes which have significant negative impact on the abutting property or property in the vicinity of the proposed subdivision. I'm not going to prolong it, but I do make the point.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And Mr. Landry, you want to sum up, and then we'll go to a decision on this recommendation?
Of course, yeah, and again, I don't want to belabor what we've already spoken about in the last two meetings, but again, this is a simple frontage variance from the requirement that we need frontage along a public street. When this application initially came in, we intended to make it a public street up to town standards. The width of the road was an issue. As you know, subdivision standards require, I believe it's an 18-foot wide road. We're at 16 feet, and that was the point of disagreement, and we weren't able to come to an agreement with the town. So at this point, we have conceded that, and it will be a private street. We've maintained the 16 feet. We could have gone as small as 12 feet and made it just a simple driveway. I understand that's been done in other locations in town, but for safety reasons, emergency access, and for our drainage purposes, it was maintained at 16 feet. There will be a private maintenance agreement if this gets developed and approved as proposed. There'll be a maintenance agreement that Mr. Richards is entitled, will be required and bound by to follow to maintain that road. The town will have no ownership of it, and that'll be at his expense. He's improving it at his expense. There's a lot of wetlands concerns here. I understand that. Those are all going to be under heavy regulation and review by CRMC and the state. There are several drainage facilities here. I don't pretend to be an engineer and understand most of those systems, but both Karen Beck and Tom Principe have testified at length in regards to those systems. There are no systems in place today along Marble Road and for these lots that are proposed, or this lot that's proposed for development. So any drainage installation here is going to be a vast improvement to what exists on site today. And there are other issues that will be sorted out by the state when we get to that point. And with regard to Marble Road, again, we've already agreed that this is subject to the rights of others to use it. We're not restricting anyone's access to it. We acknowledge that, but it's also an issue for a different court and not this board. And we just kindly ask that we proceed to an advisory opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. So we have in front of us, gentlemen, Mr. Marcel, Mr. Duluc, or Ms. Sabo, a recommendation to zoning on the frontage, the variance of the frontage of the road,
Correct, the necessary needed frontage on the road.
which requires frontage to be, for the road to be finished across the entire front of the property, but in this case, since there's,
Wetlands,
and there's
asking, yeah.
other circumstances that may not require that, and we've done this in the past. There's obviously other issues that are of concern to the neighbors. Mr. Brady's point, I think the engineering has to show, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's no net runoff to any of the neighbors. And that has to be reviewed, not by us necessarily, but by our town engineers. And I don't think anything has been shown to be deficient in that regard. I think our town engineer has accepted the engineering. But anyhow, so folks, we got to make two recommendations, one relative to the comp plan and then one relative to the relief that's required. And I'll just throw out, since I'm not making motions, well, let's get to the comp, well, no, let me, I have a concern about the wetland infill. What's the total square footage in Sabo? Like 3,900 square feet of wetland fill?
Alteration, it's over 3,000 square feet.
Over 3,000. So I have concern about, I understand that's CRMC's authority, and these guys are going to have to go to CRMC and get approval for that, right, Mike? All right, Jill? They're going to have to do that. But I think as one board member, I'd like to make at some point a finding of fact, from my perspective, that I'm opposed to that. And so that if the board agrees with that, then it would go to zoning and to CRMC. At least they would know the planning board felt that way about that particular issue, even though we don't have authority on it, correct?
Correct.
And we can do that.
If you add a finding of fact into the report, that will carry through to the zoning board, and then it theoretically would carry through.
To CRMC.
To the final decision, correct, which goes to CRMC.
If we designate it as a finding of fact, it has to pass its way through, and they have to see that in each iteration.
They'll see it, and they'll have the right to, accept the finding of fact or make
Or
a
reject
different.
it, yeah, okay, all right. So that's just my 2 cents on this, but it's up to you two. First, we have a motion relative to conformity with the comp plan and completeness of this. Mark or Rupert? Use your mic, Mark.
In reference to tax assessors plat A lots 114 and 115 Richards, I move that this project does not meet the recommendations of comprehensive plan due to the excessive wetlands alterations. I find them to be more than a minimal impact.
Is the motion complete, is the application complete?
Now, the application is complete,
But not in conformance?
but not in
And
conformance.
what specifically are you citing? I think Ms. Sabo is going to want something specific within the comp plan.
It's supposed to be just a,
Because again,
An
we've
observer tonight.
taken conformance with the comp plan, Mr. Marcella, usually from the perspective of residential property being developed in a residential neighborhood.
Correct, as far
That's
as.
usually been our
Yeah, that's
standard,
been our policy as far
Okay.
as that goes.
which I think it would comply with
It
this.
would.
Mr. Brady, he wants to cite
yeah, all right.
the
Yeah.
natural
Yeah, that would
resource
be
element.
more
would
in
be
the
more
second
in
part
the
of,
advisory.
yeah, the first one
All
would
right.
be completeness and
Yeah.
in
So
conformity
I would
with the
move-
comprehensive
I
plan
would
as
move
residential.
that tax assessors plat A, lots 114, 115, Richards, is both complete in the application and meets with the comprehensive plan.
with respect to the development of
The development of a
of
residential
the use in the zone.
usage in a residential
Okay.
zone.
Do I have a second on that? Second. So it's motion by Mr. Brady, seconded by Mr. Friday. All those in favor? Aye. So that's 3-0. Now, the motion itself, as to, remember, it's the frontage. If you move it positively on the variance, you would need to indicate any conditions that went along with that. I think staff's offered some in their summary. If you move it negatively, you would need to cite one or more of the standards that we're supposed to look at relative to these variances. And then if you had a inclination to talk about the infill of the wetland as a finding of fact, you could do that as well. Is that a separate motion, or can that be all rolled into one, Steve?
You can add additional findings within your motion.
Within the motion? Okay, thanks. So, guys, whoever wants to do it.
I'll let you do this one.
So, Rupert, it's on the road frontage. That's,
Yeah,
that's,
just on the
that's,
road frontage.
that's the recommendation.
Yes, so I concur with the chair as far as the impact of the wetlands. I guess the, yeah,
All right. As far as moving forward, tax assessors plat A, lots 114, 115 Richards. As far as the
Road frontage.
road frontage, it would move in a positive for the variance of the road frontage. I would cite that the hardship from which this application is seeking relief is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land, structured, and not to the generalistic of the surrounding areas. So,
there's a list of conditions.
yeah, I would also attach the conditions as noted on
Page 4.
page 4 of 6.
And I'd ask Mr. Landry just to, if he has any issues with any of the conditions, let us know.
I don't know if they've changed.
No, they haven't.
As of March 15th, that's, okay, thank you.
I don't think, Ms. Sabo, have they,
No,
they haven't changed since the last
no,
meeting.
no new information was submitted, therefore the report did not change.
So you're incorporating all staff's conditions? Okay.
All right. An obvious review from CMC on wetlands alterations. And I would make note that this board requested that additional runoff protection be developed. That was met with an initial affirmative by the applicant for backlots A111, A110, as far as runoff from the property.
So, I'm sorry, I missed, the finding of fact relative to the wetland infill is what?
Yeah, add the finding of fact that,
Did Mark add that?
Yeah, I did.
okay, sorry.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The
I'm not sure
alteration-
what the language is.
That the alteration in excess of 3,000 square feet of wetlands would meet CRMC approval and all review approval.
Okay, I'd like to, from my own personal view, go further than that and say, as a board member, I'm opposed to that being filled in. I don't want to just leave it to CRMC to make the decision. That's their decision anyhow.
Yep.
I would like to make a finding of fact if the majority of the board agrees that
agree?
I don't want to, I don't think it's in the best interest of the town to fill in 3,900 square feet of wetland.
All right.
And then let CRMC take that and do with what they think is
Okay.
correct.
So,
Not putting words in your mouth, that's just
No,
my view.
no, I
on
just
that.
want to reflect this as the board. So I would amend my amendment that the finding of fact in relation to the in excess of 3,000 square foot of wetlands alterations is not seen in favor by this board.
It's excessive and not in the
It's
interest of the
excessive and
town.
not meeting with the
Okay.
comprehensive plan.
And then the issue relative to the properties in the back, is that a separate finding of fact? again, it's being addressed by the engineering, but if the board wants to make it a point of emphasis,
I want to make it a point of reference.
Mr. Brady wants to make it a point of emphasis.
Yeah, you can certainly add your concern as another
Okay.
finding. I mean, it's not binding on any.
No, yeah,
No, none of
zoning will do with it what they will,
Yeah,
but.
we're just
Okay,
advising.
okay, so that's the motion. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Brady, seconded by Mr. Friday. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. Good luck, folks. Okay. Next, Gilden. Plat N-R, Lot 757, 43 Lake Road. Who is representing Mr. Gilden? Mr. Balch, are you representing
I am.
Mr. Gilden? Or the Gildens?
Gilden's, yep. We couldn't hear you half the time. Oh, you did?
Yeah, he just wasn't leaning up to it. Go ahead.
Okay.
So this is a request for an addition to an existing home, and it's going to require a variance, or requesting a variance on front yard setback, correct?
Correct.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This is an existing three-bedroom home owned by David and Cindy Gilden. It's on Lake Avenue in Bonnet Shores. So it's on the north side of Lake Avenue, the pond, West Big Pond, and it's on the south side of Lake Avenue. The owners are proposing to demolish their existing stairs, which are exterior to the building, and they want to construct a new interior set of stairs so that it's a safer approach for them to get up to the upper floor. It's a full flight of stairs up to this main floor. They want to also add a small addition on the back of the building to kind of square in. You can see that a little small rectangular square in the back, rectangular area. And they want to fill in that corner. And that will be over the existing first floor deck, and it'll also replace a second floor deck. So what's happened is the front yard setback is right up against the face of the house, or pretty close to it, within a foot or so. And so any addition they do is already going to need a dimensional variance from the front yard setback. So while they were doing the stairs, they thought it'd be, if they could, they would like to be able to add to the face of the house to make it more attractive with everything else that's going on in the area. So they're needing a 5-foot dimensional variance from the front yard. Normally is 25 is required. Drainage has been provided, there's sufficient parking, and any issues with floodplain, flood zone will be mitigated with flood vents, and any living space or anything below the upper floor will be removed.
Is the garage going to remain, it's just going to come out, or is the garage gone?
Well, I'll let the architect answer that. I think they're keeping one and, yeah, they're keeping one and extending one. So they're going to extend both the face of the building,
Correct.
but I think they're keeping one garage.
And the Sabota parking is sufficient? If they were granted the variance, there would still be enough off-street room
Yes.
for parking?
Yeah, there's sufficient in the driveway now.
Right.
Sufficient for 4 cars.
But it's, no, I'm saying this way,
Yeah.
coming towards the street.
Yeah, but there'll still be 20 feet. And a
Okay.
normal parking space is typically 9 by 18.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask, because they're showing on the plan there 20 feet. Is that what we require for parking? I thought it was 22 feet.
No, typically it's 200 square feet per
Car,
space, which
per
would be
vehicle.
10 by 20.
It is 10 by 20, okay. Yeah. My concern was as they move forward, they would move the rear ends of the cars
Yeah.
out over
the
public
street.
property. That was my concern. But there's still, even so, there's still the garage parking space that could be used.
But they're going to have to park up against the building.
Yeah,
To get the 20 feet.
Okay.
It's an R10 zoning district. It's within 200 feet of the coastal feature, and it's within the town's high groundwater table overlay. So we've addressed stormwater from the increased roof area with a couple of rain gardens that have been approved by the town engineer.
Excuse me, we have the relief relative to the wetlands overlay, the coastal overlay, and then the setback, front setback. Those
Yeah,
are
I
the three.
understand, I understand from the section 4.4 doesn't apply based on your,
No, so this property had previously received a variance and special use permit under section 4.4, which is the Coastal Resources Overlay District, and they're not getting any closer, so they wouldn't need a variance. The variance has already been granted, so it's a
Right, because the
special
house
permit.
isn't moving closer to coastal.
Correct, so it
Right.
would be a special use permit from both sections 4.3
Okay.
and 4.4 for the
Gotcha.
coastal wetland and the coastal
okay.
feature.
And just before we get the board discussion or public discussion, the conditions, just so we know, there's conditions there.
You talking about from the prior approval or from?
No, the conditions from staff, anything,
No, there was no issues there.
there are no issues, okay. So, anything else, Mr. Bellis?
No, it was pretty,
Okay.
it's pretty simple. I can have the architect, he's got some renderings that might make it easier to picture what's going on.
If the board wants
Yeah.
to see them,
Yeah.
I'm just, and maybe we'll look at them, I'm just concerned about the necessity of this, since, I think if they could qualify for the average setback in the front, they would have. I went down the street, everybody seems to be at the proper setback. There doesn't seem to be any variances that have been granted in the neighborhood relative to front setback, so
Well,
this
even-
would put it closer to the street than virtually any house on Lake Road that I looked at.
That's understood. Even if we didn't extend the garage, they still would like to do the interior stairs, because right now, they just have the exterior stairs in the upper left-hand corner of that house,
Right.
and it's a full flight of exterior stairs, so they're trying to move some stairs inside the house, so they're easier and safer during inclement weather.
The difficulty is it's built right now up to the front yard setback, right?
Yes.
There's no margin, so I understand that point. I'm not sure I think that that's an overwhelming necessity or hardship, but I understand it. Anyone else want to comment, and then we'll go to the public? Joe?
Yeah, why can't the stairs be moved further back, further away from the road?
Can we go back to the other?
Or moved internally, however. I don't understand why it has to be out like that.
Yeah, thank you.
You got a pointer?
I can't answer that question. I can have the architect answer that question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
architect can come up.
This is Michael Byrne, he's the
Michael
architect.
Byrne from Arcasium. For the first question, maybe a little show and tell. The stairwells as they exist right now are over, I know I didn't get these in time, so I don't know if you guys can see this.
They might have that. Do you have that, Mike?
No. I don't
Okay,
have that.
no, okay.
This extends, the existing stairwell exterior extends past the setback line as it currently is. So we want to internalize that primarily for safety. It's just a common sense consideration. And to the other question, why can't we move back into the house? We're trying to minimize the impact on the existing structure and the interior space as well. And that would make it somewhat prohibitive to start going back into the existing space. I have a couple of copies of
So,
this.
let me ask you real quick. So could you enclose that stairwell to make it safer and then not extend along the entire face, the addition? Could you
Well,
do that?
But there's a secondary issue, and that is the way this house was built. There's an existing garage under this, what we're going to use as
Right.
the interior. That's kind of funky. It's not a good place to put it. You have the other garage here. What we're proposing is to take that space and put both of these garage areas on the same side. So it makes more sense because that space now is now not usable. Oh, here we are. I
But if-
can't.
But
where
if you
the new-
enclose the stairs, you'd still have the one garage that exists on the other side, on the left side, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And of course, the reason, that setback between what you're looking at, the fascia of the garage and that stairwell of the new entry, there's only a 2-foot reveal there. We didn't come out, we minimized as much as we can, and it is an aesthetic consideration, absolutely.
Anyone else? Joe?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So looking at what I have in front of me, the front of these garages right here are sticking out further than here, right?
2 feet.
So these guys then to the front of the property is 20 feet.
That's correct.
And this area over here that we've been talking about, in terms of the internal stairwell, is,
22 feet. It's further back. It's set back further.
this is 25 feet from here?
22 feet.
22.
22 feet from there.
So the face of the garage is 20 from the setback to the stairwell. It's set back further by 2 feet, so it's 22 feet.
Excuse me, just let me interrupt. The 5-foot variance only applies to the sections where the garages are.
Correct.
It's a 3-foot variance
To
to the front door.
entrance.
That's correct.
And at present, the distance is presently.
20, yeah, 25. They built it
A
right
little
on
better
the
than
line.
25, yeah.
So I'm missing something. So you're extending the face of the garages then out?
Yep.
Why?
Because I want to make this somewhat contextual to the entire space. If this entry is all, to try and keep this in line, we're
Yeah.
putting a deck on top of that extension. It makes no sense to try and keep somewhat of a functional deck at 3 feet in line, and it's just not going to look good. It's going to be just not conceptually good.
But every foot you're moving forward is a violation of what the code is.
I understand that.
So,
That's why we're asking for this remedy.
Right.
well, you could ask for anything, I'm sure.
But you could enclose, you could do that front entrance and not bump out the garages at all. And that would accomplish enclosing the stairwell, would it not?
Can you go back to the picture, please?
Yeah, go back to the picture. Yeah, the rendering. So you could do that whole front door thing and close the stairwell, but leave the garage where it was. Could you not?
Yes, but it's not going to really add anything to what we're trying to accomplish for the whole.
I get that.
It's an architectural question,
Okay.
gentlemen. It's a design question, not, yeah, can we bump this out and put this in? What's it going to look like? You know,
But if you had an empty lot, you could design this exactly how you wanted and place it within the setbacks. Right now, you're asking for a variance on the setbacks that you don't have any marginal room because the original house was built up against the setback.
I got
So
it. I got it.
we need to see a hardship, not a, I want this because it's nicer looking. That's kind of our
It's in
standard.
context of the rest of the street. So, we're trying to keep all of these things as part of the consideration.
Okay. Anybody else down there?
I would just repeat what the chair mentioned earlier, going up and down the street. Most of the places have a pretty reasonable setback. This is going to be one of the closest to the road, if this is granted.
And you notice it's advisory, you go to zoning after this, so you know. Anybody else down
Yeah,
there?
we're just advisory, you know that.
Right, understood.
You got anything else, Jeff? Or, does anyone in the public want to comment on this? Nope, okay. So we'll make our recommendation now. Thank you.
So move the application before us, Gildan Tax Assessor Plat NR Lot 757 is complete and conforms with Town Comprehensive Plan.
So I have a motion for completeness and conformity with the comp plan by Dr. O'Neill, seconded by Mr. Brady. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Friday? Yes, aye. 4-0, thank you. And then the motion itself,
Yeah.
everybody? Joe?
Move the application before us, Gildan Tax Assessor Plat NR Lot 757 negatively. The staff's memo here dated April 12th, 2020. There are a number of issues, one of which is there are other alternatives to this proposal. And this is not the least relief necessary. Number 4 on the standards. And there are alternatives. So with that,
Should be 16 in the planning board reviews.
16, number 16?
Yep.
Number 16, there are alternatives to the proposed project. It's my
So that's Dr. O'Neill's motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Friday. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 4-0. Good luck. Going to zoning. Okay. Next, recommendation to the town council, partial road abandonment, Barron Road, Mr. McGreen.
Evening, Mr. Chairman. Jack McGreen for the petitioner. So and I also have with me Brian Thorman from DePrete Engineering to run you through the plan. But the petition is, petitioner is Narragansett Holdings LLC, and they filed an application with the town council to abandon a portion of Barron Road. If you could bring up the map. So, yeah, there we go. So,
Got a pointer there?
yeah, I do. There we go. So here's Barron Road running right through the parcel. My client owns all the property surrounding, it's a paper road. It's not built. And they're seeking an abandonment from the town council to abandon this portion of Barron Road. And there is a house to the right, house to the left, owned by other homeowners. As the staff report pointed out, their access won't be interrupted by the abandonment if it were to go through. I do have Brian here to go over the existing conditions and to answer any engineering questions that you have or that may have been raised with the staff report. So Brian, there we go.
Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the board, for the record, Brian Thalman. I'm a professional engineer and a senior project manager with DePrete Engineering. Here on behalf of the applicant, Narragansett Holdings LLC, who are seeking, as Mr. McGreen indicated, to abandon a portion of Barron Road. The subject parcels are APY and lots 78, 79, and 85. In totality, including the roadway, it represents about 2.3 acres, of which about 0.4 acres is the actual roadway. Currently, there's an existing single-family dwelling here, which is connected to a garage with some living space above it, and then there are numerous outbuildings, which are essentially sheds, scattered throughout the property. It's currently serviced by an on-site OWTS, which was a subject of a repair application in the early 1970s, and it's also serviced by municipal water. Narragansett Holdings acquired the property, and they are looking to do a new structure. We've, on a very preliminary basis, met with DEM, and DEM would like to see the wetlands, which while the town's GIS show them kind of limited here, they actually extend to the north and then connect in here as well. Because the property has been kind of actively used as a residence for as long as it has, DEM would like us to try and reestablish some of this vegetation in here to get the wetland back to what it is, as the buffer, the actual wetland edge extends well into the property now. Wetlands are characterized by two features, those being vegetative and soil. So, we do have wetland soils that indicate that this is hydric. As the staff report indicates, we are in 2 of the high water table aquifer overlay protection districts. Essentially, the boundary is this lot line at 78. To the west of it is the Category B soils, and the more restrictive Category A soils essentially represent this portion of the property. We have done some preliminary test pits, which have been witnessed by DEM's on-site wastewater treatment system. We are able to cite a advanced treatment system in this area here, and then a meeting with the freshwater wetlands staff. What they would like to see us do is pull as much as we can, the new structure into this area in here. We are going to have to meet some low-impact development techniques related to stormwater for a single-family lot. It's my understanding the applicant has no further plans to subdivide this property. This is just a single-family dwelling, and it's just trying to work within the parameters. The kind of curveball, if you will, that we have to deal with right now is if we were to propose something in here, because this is a town right-of-way, they would have to become party to the DEM application. This allows us to essentially take the parcel, make it one parcel, and then eliminate the need to have the town participate in the application process.
It become one parcel if the road was abandoned? Is that,
Yes. Yes.
and all merged into which lot?
However, the assessor seeks to,
Right now, it's,
if they go back to the one we
you'll
just,
see,
so this is lot 78, this is lot 79, and this is lot 85.
Okay.
So are
we
these,
have to do an administrative subdivision to merge them. I think that was in the staff report.
are these deed restricted to remain one single parcel?
They're not.
There's no intention to do that?
There is intention.
There is intention to do that?
To make, the house is gonna go right in the middle of the lot, so.
I understand that.
Speaking, unless they change the rules, I don't think we'll be able to put another house in the wetlands. But that being said, it's my client's intention to make it a single lot.
But we can't, I understand from Mr. Marcello and before, we can't put a condition that the lot can never be subdivided.
Correct, correct.
Right.
You can put all the conditions you want, right?
Well, but not, that one we can't even put on
That
paper.
has to be them.
You know, it would be my,
No.
Well,
no.
yeah, see, so they're only, I mean, we're only here for advisory on the road abandonment.
Right, but we're looking down the road as to what the potential might be. So-
Well, that would be up to the town council. I mean, I see that and I see two lots. But I'm not saying that's not the intention of the owner, but
Right.
I'm looking at that and I see two lots. You know, if they merge it in, but that's not your charge tonight, it's just on the road abandonment.
But it's,
Yeah, it's a
I think it's
consider-
part of our
Yeah,
recommendation
it's
to the council.
it's absolutely a consideration that the council should take should take into consideration.
Oh, Mr. Friday, I'm sorry.
So, Mr. Marcella, my understanding is that there was a charter change that the town can't dispose of any property without voter approval?
The town can't sell any property.
Okay.
So what has been the policy of the town council is that they could still abandon it for zero consideration. But recently, they haven't acted on any of these abandonments for zero consideration. And they're looking to, we'd have to go before the state legislature to change the state law, then change our ordinance, and then we would need the vote.
To go to the,
Yeah, we
ballot.
need to go to the voters, so it'd be, unfortunately, Narragansett would be a three-step process. For instance, in Cranston, it's pretty simple. It's in our ordinance, it's in the state law. They basically do an appraisal, and it's per square foot, and if the town council, or city council abandons it, those people on both sides have to pay X amount of dollars.
whatever the assessment is.
So here, the consideration of the town council will either be to abandon it for no consideration, or to, otherwise they can't sell it for funds.
But that's been under consideration. I think it's still something the council is going to look at.
Yeah, so they haven't approved since.
They haven't done it.
They haven't approved a
Right.
subdivision since in my recent memory because of that. They don't want to give away the property, but the same instance,
So-
they could abandon it if they wish.
The other thing that we do, we always ask town departments. Engineering didn't seem to have a problem. Police didn't seem to have a problem. Fire didn't have a problem as long
Town
as,
engineer didn't respond.
yeah, there's a memo in there. Yeah, it's not in the summary, it's in the package. The fire department, if it were abandoned, he'd want some kind of hammerhead or extension. But the public work director did express some concerns that the town might want to use that property in the future. So we have to take all that into consideration as well.
I read between the lines on that, I saw that brief mention, right after he said that, he was opposed because of the lack of consideration. So we actually have a proposal we're gonna present before the town council, which I think may satisfy the statute, is doing what's called a voluntary contribution to perhaps the Land Conservation Trust. So it wouldn't be a sale, we would be getting, they would just abandon it, and we are going to give a voluntary contribution to the Land Conservation Trust, which I think would get around, in my opinion.
Is that,
He's not prepared.
So that opinion is for Mr. Davis to give to the town council, not for me to give to you guys.
so
That's going to be our approach.
so let me just, right or wrong, the voters voted to not divest town property without approval of the voters. That seems to be something to get around that.
I mean, also depending on the timeline that the applicant wishes, they could ask the city council to put it on the next, like this voting time, we had 22 trucks, XXX.
18 desks
18
and
desks.
4 chairs,
They
I
could,
know.
they could put this, this abandonment on for X amount of dollars. That's another option that,
They could.
because,
But
and the voters could vote on it.
I guess the biggest thing for me, Mr. McGreen, is regardless of intention of the applicant. First of all, I think the council needs to square up the issue of charging. Myself, for abandonment, I just think they need to take care of that issue one way or the other, and we need to decide, because I think it makes sense to charge people for real property if they want it.
Was the legislation submitted to get it?
It was submitted, it hasn't passed, I know that. I know,
Could be this June, though, when they put everything through.
Could be.
they usually wait till June.
So I think there's an issue relative to the charge to resolve, but the bigger issue here, I think in this one is, despite the intention of the applicant, this land can be subdivided, according to Mr. DeLuca, and create an additional lot that doesn't exist today. Now, if the donation to the land trust that you present to the council is commensurate with a 10,000 square foot lot in Narragansett, which is not a cheap thing, obviously, land's at a premium, I think the council would have to take that into consideration, because whether it's this owner or the next owner, it could be subdivided according to Mike, and it didn't look like it was that big a stretch to create another lot. Sir?
Given the restrictions both in your subdivision regulations and then taking into account land that's designated as unsuitable for development, I would be hard-pressed to say that we could make two 20,000 square foot lots that meet the required buildable area and then meet setbacks and frontage.
Mike?
Well, we have a survey here that gives us the square footage of the lots as they've been proposed. And there is sufficient land area, gross land area, to provide 20,000 square feet and 100 feet of frontage on Cantone for each one. Ms. Thalman is correct. There are a couple areas in this site that show up in the GIS mapping as wetland, but we don't have those flagged and verified. As we all know, and we've done this many, many times through the years, sometimes these wetlands that are depicted in GIS are smaller than in actuality, and sometimes they're larger. So I'm taking the very conservative approach.
Which you should.
That the wetlands shown here in the northeastern quadrant and this little tiny bit down here, which is a ASSF, I believe,
could be that big, or they could be somewhat smaller. If they're somewhat smaller, they could have the by right allowance to do this. If they're not that much smaller, they still have the right to come in and request the relief necessary to create the fourth lot.
And we've seen lots that are challenged and compromised that still are able to be built on. And we could just pick up Sunday's paper. I mean,
So,
there are.
I'm not disagreeing with Mr. Thalman that by visual look, there could be more wetland here than would allow by right, but this board has the right to waive that. It is not a zoning board issue. You can waive the
Right.
counting or the subtraction of the wetland from the gross area if you wanted to allow for the fourth lot to be created. But we're sitting here looking at GIS, which we know is not ground truthed, has not been surveyed. So in abundance of caution, I pointed out in my memo that I think there's a possibility for a fourth
Yeah,
lot.
and I think it's prudent for the town to assess what the potential is and be able to charge and to make an assessment and to charge that amount.
Is it possible to go back to the abandonment plan for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So on the abandonment plan, we've actually flagged the wetland edge, and it is depicted as this dashed line that traverses through the property and then comes through here. This is the actual vegetated edge. Now, as we all know, in July of 2023, DEM amended their wetlands regulations, and the wetlands that are found on this property are now subject to a much greater setback, where in some cases, the wetlands that were down here didn't really have any setback. They now have a 25-foot setback, and then this wetland edge, which had a 50-foot setback, now has a 75-foot setback. So in a plan that shows all of the buffers, essentially this area is completely contained within those buffers. And that is kind of the premise for DEM's discussions that we had on the pre-application basis to, as much as we can, push everything forward to where existing development exists now here, such that this has an opportunity to kind of revegetate itself. The other aspect of this is we would have to go through a subdivision suitability process where we have to demonstrate that we can meet the requirements of the regulations for an on-site wastewater treatment system. The test pits that we conducted in here, we were unsuccessful in getting a water table that would allow the creation of a new lot. We have two that are closer to Point Judith Road to the west, in front of the existing structure. Here, that we can come up with an advanced treatment system. And given, in all likelihood now, the existing on-site wastewater treatment system is here, and based on the data that we looked at when we reviewed the repair application, in all likelihood, it's in the water. So we're going to have to come up with some form of advanced treatment system here, make this more conforming or conforming to the regulations. But I don't see where we could get anything that would support a new lot without a variance, and DEM, under their on-site wastewater treatment regulations now, will not create a new lot where you need a variance.
And if we can assess that through the town council action, the appropriate amount, when this gets abandoned, then they can go forward. But it just makes me uneasy to do this without the ability to charge, and there's the potential for more land there. But that's just me.
Yeah, and
Joe?
The other thing I want to expand upon was the fire chief's recommendation related to a hammerhead turnaround. That was predicated on an extension of the road further. We have no intention of extending the roadway beyond where it terminates now, which is, oops, I think my battery died. Right here. We have no intention of upgrading or extending that any
Okay.
further.
All right, thank you. Joe?
And it has already been said that it's always nice to have this conversation, but the people who own this property a few years from now come before us, it's a totally different conversation. You know that.
Yes.
So if you're on this side of the table for a while, that comes up regularly, so I think your intentions are, you know,
Having served,
obviously positive, but the future is the future. And there are some department comments here that are not supportive of this. And finally, I just, we represent the town and the public. There are, I'll bet, 1,000 people in this town who would love to have 15,000 square feet of property in Narragansett to build on, So this is 15,000 square feet, it's 14.8, isn't it? It's just under 15,000 square
It's a lot
feet
of
of
land.
property
Yeah.
that is to be abandoned. I can't support that,
Doctor, isn't the appropriate look at this as to whether or not this paper road has any utility to the town, not the value? I mean, the value, we're gonna have a discussion with the town council as to the value if they decide to abandon it. I believe the appropriate analysis this board should have is whether or not this paper road has any future or present utility to the town, other than money. I don't really think it's appropriate.
I disagree,
This
Mr.
board to decide
McQueen.
whether- if
I mean, I think we can comment on whether or not we think the town should receive compensation for this land. This is
We don't disagree.
real land, so we're going to make that recommendation to the council. They're going to do what
They're gonna do what they're
No, I
gonna do.
understand, but just in terms of the analysis, I believe that you're charged with determining whether or not, in your opinion, this road has any utility to the town, not money.
Well,
Well, there are hesitations on the part of some of the town
Public Works.
departments,
yeah,
aren't there?
And Mr. DeLuca's done his due diligence relative to the utilities and all that. I get that. That's part of our drill. You can read between the lines on that memo, and I can read something different between the lines, but it seemed like the Public Works Director wasn't enthused. And then it comes down to, what do we want to recommend to the council? I think that the elephant in the room is that there could be further subdivision. I understand your point, but we got to listen to our planner. There could be further subdivision, and that's a big piece of change that, I don't know what you're proposing to offer as a donation. It'd be interesting to hear Mr. Davis's legal view on that, but I don't know if the money's going to be enough to be commensurate with a 10,000 or 20,000 square foot lot. But, gentlemen, we got to move.
Yeah, so I agree with you. The sort of concerns I had is that these are being done piecemeal. I think in addition to advice to the council that they shouldn't abandon this, I think the council should direct us or staff to develop a process and criteria for evaluating these proposals. And I guess sort of the questions I had coming in were, have the neighbors been notified of this proposal to abandon the right-of-way?
Just through the public
Through the public,
advertising, there's no
yeah.
requirement of a 200-foot radius or anything like that.
Right.
It's only the people have.
Because there's public right-of-ways near me that if they were abandoned and I didn't know it was being proposed, it would bother me.
The only people that get the notice are the people that, should it be abandoned, would share in, they would own to the center line of the road being abandoned. And in this instance, my client.
Jack,
owns
nobody can hear
everything
you.
around it.
Nobody can hear you out there.
Yeah, you got to get to the mic.
So, I'm sorry. So, on a road abandonment, the only people that get notified is the people that would share in the road abandonment, should it get abandoned, so they would own to 50% of the line. And since my client owns everything around this road, they're the only one that gets noticed.
And I guess the other thing I was thinking, Terry, is, should the land trust see proposals like this? Because there's other properties that the land trust is considering acquiring small parcels for environmental reasons.
Well,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
an
that's
abandoned
not.
road.
Yeah, so it's under the town council.
Yeah, and it'd be a donation, as I understand it, to the land trust, not land. This isn't land, I don't think, the land trust, because it's just an abandoned road. It's
Correct.
long, it's 14,000 square feet, but it's
Could be
not
a
something.
linear park.
Yeah, or a footpath.
Part of a trail.
Through other things, yeah. Mark, anything else? We're going to move on.
Yeah, my biggest concern in all of this is there is no systematic process for going through this. I mean, they come in willy-nilly, and I don't think that's fair to the applicant, but it's certainly not fair to the residents of the community. So we don't have that, obviously. And so I think it would make it cleaner and easier. I think based on what we see in front of us, we have to give a recommendation. That's all we're doing, right?
Right, and Mr.
We're just
McGreen's
giving a
correct.
recommendation.
I mean, to be fair to everybody, we have a process in town. Mr. DeLuca follows it. He goes through the steps, he checks with all the other departments, he checks on utilities, he checks on whether or not it could be further subdivided. That's the due diligence. The piece that's missing is being able to charge for it,
Right.
which the council has to initiate. And Mr. McGreen's right, those standards, you know, however you read the lines are either met or not met, but this charge aspect still sits here, and I think, I think we should push the council to take some kind of action on this so that we can do it. Steve, X amount of towns in Rhode Island are allowed to charge for abandoned roads?
Yeah, correct. You just need an enabling statute in the state adds you to the list. If you ever look at some of those statutes, it says Burrillville, and then 2 years later, it's Pawtucket.
So there's 8 or 9 towns that have done that.
Correct.
Then they just change their ordinance.
Then it's a very simple
Then they do an
internal
assessment and they charge.
Like North Providence, that they have the statute, the enabling statute.
Yep.
And once they agree, we have the hearing, they decide there's no utility to the road for the town, then they turn it over to the tax assessor to come up with
Correct.
a market value. And it's usually they usually do it per, whatever, you look at what they're charging for this lot right now. I came up with $515 per thousand times 14/8. I came up with $81,838 as the value of the property.
Okay, whatever. I don't,
I mean, that's what my client, based on what other towns do, that's how they come up with it.
What was the number again, John?
81,838.
okay, I think we've got all this. Is there anyone in the public that has any comments on this? Nope, they're not here for this one, okay. So we need to make a recommendation to get, when are you going to the council, Mr. McGreen?
May 1st.
May 1st, okay. All right, so it's a simple recommendation to the council as to whether or not we recommend that they accept this abandonment. I guess the devil in the details is what's the criteria that you would pass on? I mean, it sounds like everybody's not in favor of this, but the motion needs to communicate to the council what the rationale is. Certainly Mike's done his due diligence on everything but expressed concern about subdivision. But then there's the charge issue, which I still think, despite what the attorneys are saying, we still need to make a comment about that. It's my opinion. Steve?
Yeah, you can make a comment on
I
anything you
know,
want.
I know.
It's just
I
whether,
got 2 attorneys telling me it's not, don't talk about money.
it's really, obviously, you can comment on it, and the town council can take that into consideration or not.
You know how much they listen to us. So, go ahead, Joe, folks.
Where I come from, $81,000 is a lot of money.
Are you ready to take this one? I'll leave it to you.
Rupert, Joe, anybody? Somebody jump in. We got to get going, guys.
got to move.
So I make a motion that we send a recommendation to town council to turn down this road abandonment. And I guess, based on the notes from DPW, and can we include in our motion encouraging them to,
I would, you may
develop
want to
and adopt.
consider the fact that Mr. DeLuca has identified, despite people disagreeing, that it could be subdivided.
could be subdivided?
And
as
that
a
whether it can or
provision?
can't, the board, if you guys are so inclined, wants the council to make a determination on charging for these abandonments so that we have a clear policy going forward. And they should initiate, the steps so that we can charge.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, folks, we're bouncing a little bit back and forth. I would make a motion for denial of, thank you. I would make a motion for denial of the right-of-way abandonment in this case, one, based on the recommendations by the staff, two, We are not in the business of creating additional value, and the possibility of an additional lot without compensation back to the town is irresponsible. We would also recommend to the council to determine their process of approval based on compensation, not only in creation of new properties or potential new lots, but also on the value of the road itself. We do not have that and cannot proceed without that guidance.
And in this particular case, it has been opined by Mr. DeLuca that possibly there could be an additional lot created.
Yeah, I
It's
mentioned
not-
that. and I
Okay,
also
it's not
mentioned-
just the,
I
it's not
mentioned-
just the abandoned road.
No, I mentioned the lot creation itself, but I also mentioned recommendations by the staff.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second on that? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, this will be the briefest one of the night, right, Mrs. Sabo? This is recommendation to Town Council zoning ordinance amendment, section 4.3. And this comes under the heading of, the state's already done what they're doing, and we just have to accept it.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Correct. So the brief synopsis is in 2015, the state law changed, General Assembly changed the state law, and 2022, on July 1st, the rules were promulgated, took effect. And there were multiple changes, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but it was definitions, designations, procedures for RIDEM staff, and most importantly for you folks, the effect on zoning ordinances. So Rhode Island General Law 452430C says cities and towns shall be prohibited from, once the rules are promulgated, cities and towns shall be prohibited from applying the requirements in the existing zoning ordinances. So the town has revised its section 4.3, which is the coastal and freshwater wetlands overlay district, to comply with the new regulations. I put before you today a red line of those changes, and I just want to go through them briefly. They're pretty short. We did a few things. We changed the definitions for coastal wetlands and freshwater wetlands to comply with the state definitions. We made some general cleanup, some, just typographical and cleanup changes for under the district defined. So you'll see that. We changed the definition for prohibited uses to match the state. We changed under section 3 for our special use permit uses. We changed that language, revised it so to no longer require a special use permit for freshwater wetlands. All of that goes either to RIDEM or to CRMC. And then we added in probably the most, I want to say the most important, but the biggest change is that we added in a new section called section 5, special review uses. And this basically says that because our regulation goes away, doesn't mean the wetland itself goes away. They're still there. They go away, and they still inform the decisions that you make based on other aspects of our ordinance, as we just discussed here, for subdivisions and where wetlands are for yielding. But as far as the zoning ordinance is concerned, through the bulk regulations that were recently made a couple of years ago, we changed the definition for net lot area. And in that definition, we referred to verified edges for coastal and freshwater wetlands. So the special review uses sort of dovetails with that and acknowledges that the town still may require a verified edge from the state regulating body. And should an application come to us that is in that purview where we no longer have purview, that those approvals will be required prior to the issuance of a building permit. That's it. Those are the changes.
Is this retro to some date?
Well, we lost our ability to regulate in July.
They just
Right.
gave us a year to
They gave us a
take it
year.
out.
Mm-hmm.
So we're ahead of schedule.
So we're ahead of schedule. And this will go to the council, and then these would be incorporated 2 readings into the ordinance? Is that the way it works?
Yes.
Okay.
And then as the chair asked, then it becomes mandated as of July? Is that what you said?
Of last year.
Last year, we
Last
already
year, Doc.
lost it.
So it
Yeah,
is
doctor.
retro.
Much like the first item on tonight's agenda, right?
Yes, correct. So the,
CRMC's got authority over that wetland.
exactly.
We
That's why,
just, we just made our,
a
our
year and a half
feelings
ago, that
known.
would have been a special use permit.
right. I hope people understand that. I mean, we made, in that case, we made a statement to reflect our view, and hopefully CRMC sees it, but we don't have the authority, obviously. Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions, folks? No? Anyone in the public want to comment on what the state has mandated and taken from the town? Okay,
Mr.
so it
Chairman.
would be a recommendation, yeah, Mike?
I just wanted to point out, you all have it in front of you, that Ms. Sabo provided you with a staff report, and as is our requirement, when you're looking at zone changes, text or map,
All right.
we do have to make conclusions as they relate to consistency with the comp plan and consistency with purposes of zoning. You'll see in her staff note, her staff report, that has all been provided, and that we did recommend approval of the changes as drafted.
Thank you.
So
So
we'd ask that you
the motion
accommodate
would
that.
incorporate staff's
Yeah,
findings.
incorporate staff's
Yeah,
findings.
and then we would be covering all the standards by just incorporating what the staff's done.
So we want a motion positively for all this?
You don't have to.
We don't need a motion.
Well, if you want to
Because-
move, if
because
you
it's-
want to move the recommendation to the council, sure.
Just briefly, what these changes do is makes our internal ordinance consistent with the state law. Jill already explained that. But more importantly for us, we actually thought about taking 4.3 right out of the ordinance completely. And then we realized, no, it still has great value as an advisory tool, a guidance tool, as Jill mentioned to you. So it makes it refines the language to enhance the applicability of it as a guidance tool. So that's really
Okay.
why we want to make these other wording changes.
Thank you.
So we don't need a motion, it's already incorporated.
No, we need a motion to the council to incorporate these in the town ordinance with the justification as enumerated by the staff memo.
So moved.
Is that sufficient, guys? Mike, Joe? Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
A motion by Dr. O'Neill, seconded by Mr. Friday. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I want to take literally 5, and then, because we're going to be here a long time. I'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and take the last item on the agenda. Yeah. Folks, I want to get back to order. If everybody can have a seat, please. Okay, I'm going to just call this and then give you hopefully a little timeline here. This is informational hearing, master plan review, land development, comprehensive permit, Old Boston Neck Road LLC, 20 units, plat N-B, lot 30A, Old Boston Neck Road. We're going to start the meeting tonight. We're going to go to a reasonable hour, I hope. We'll see how it goes, but at some point, we're going to stop it and continue it. We're already scheduled for a follow-up meeting on April 26th in this room at 6 p.m. This is the only item on the agenda, correct? Yes, sir. Mr. DeLuca, this is the only item on the 26th, and at that meeting, we're going to have to, by the end of the night, even if it's the wee hours, we're going to have to render a decision on the master plan. So tonight, we're going to start with the applicant, his attorney, who's going to present the proposal, and expert witnesses. And I won't speak for him, but I'm not sure they're all here, so he may need to continue his expert witnesses on the 26th. If we have some time tonight after the witnesses that are in here have their testimony, if we have some time, we'll take some general public comment, but I think most of the public's got to anticipate that if they want to speak, it's probably going to be on the 26th. So, Mr. Doherty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patrick Doherty, Doherty and Associates Law Incorporated at 887 Boston Neck Road. I'm here representing Old Boston Neck Road LLC, the applicant for a comprehensive permit for low and moderate income housing development. And one thing I'd just like to say for purposes, I know the board is familiar with it, but I think it's very important to just state on the record that this is not a low-income housing development akin to Section 8, fully subsidized low-income housing that you normally find in inner-city areas. What this is this is a legislative scheme that was put together by the General Assembly to promote the construction of affordable housing in the cities and communities, the towns in the state of Rhode Island. Every day in the news, you hear about the need for more affordable housing. And the affordable housing that is part of the 25% component of this development, which is 20 units, 10 buildings with 10 duplexes, 5 of which will be set at an affordable rate. The affordable rate is somewhere in the $300,000 range. And so therefore, you can understand that there is a need for persons in the community to have a place to purchase a home and realize the American dream of home ownership and still be in a community that they grew up in and that they work in and they have kids in without having to get priced out of the market. So I would like to also preface the presentation to address some of the concerns that I've heard, expressed in op-ed pieces and whatnot as well, to just remind this board and the public that's here listening that we are mindful of the fact that there are environmental concerns and there are water concerns and wetlands concerns in just about every development project that takes place in the town of Narragansett, if not the state of Rhode Island. We realize and have engineered plans to show that there will be no net increase in runoff from the subject property. That's something that we're obligated to do, and that's something that this board will look at very carefully in the preliminary and the final stages as well to ensure that the standards are met and that there is no net increase in runoff from the property. In addition to that, we have to satisfy the regulatory authorities that there will be no adverse impact to the wetlands. I have a wetlands person here this evening who will be testifying on the location and the flagging of those wetlands, and that process is underway as well with the state agency in charge of that, and we're awaiting a final determination on that. But again, according to the state law governing the review of comprehensive permits, we're not required to show that until the final approval stage. And I cite for you Rhode Island General Laws 45-53-4A1, which contains that specific provision. In addition to that, we have already satisfied Rhode Island Housing that this project would be eligible for a subsidy, which is one of the prerequisites of the law. They don't want developments to go through that don't comply and qualify for subsidies for moderate income housing. In addition, we have already obtained the agreement of the Narragansett Affordable Housing Corporation to be the agreed-upon state-approved monitoring agency for the affordable units to ensure that the intent of the law and the ordinance is met. So, just to be clear, this project, as designed thus far, is designed to be fully in compliance with all environmental regulations, all wetlands regulations, and to work towards building another component in affordable housing in the town of Narragansett, which we desperately need. We have an obligation as a city and town in Rhode Island to meet a 10% minimum stock of affordable housing, and we're far below that right now. And it's been a number of years. I have an expert here who's analyzed the affordable housing plan, looked at the number of units that have been put online, look at what's left, and also analyze the available land that is here in Narragansett that could be a place for additional housing of this nature. And as this board is well aware, we're running out of land pretty quick here in Narragansett due to the constraints and also just the lack of adequate parcels and suitability. So with that, we also have some testimony tonight, too, about the on-site wastewater treatment systems that are planned for this project as well. We've believed that we can fully contain any and all of the concerns over that. We absolutely have to satisfy DEM on that as well, and I don't think that there's going to be a problem with the plans that have been engineered. So with that being said, I'd like to bring up Eric Privy, who is the engineer for the project engineer, to go over an overview of the site plan, the facilities, and just the site constraints and what we're working with, and how we're managing those to comply with the ordinance. And the other thing, too, one thing I do want to say is, in addition to the state law, it's not just a cram down of state law, as I've heard it put in the op-ed pieces in the media. This is also incorporated into our ordinance in the town of Narragansett. And so this is not an end around. This is an actual exercise of an opportunity in the law by the developer that he is entitled to make under state and local regulation. So we're here tonight to expose what we're doing and show that we're going to comply in all respects. We have waivers, naturally, a big list of waivers that we're requesting, but we're entitled to ask for those under state law. And what we propose to do is to add 5 units of affordable housing to the housing stock in the town of Narragansett, which will greatly benefit those 5 owners of that property when they do purchase it in the future. So if I may, and I would like the record to reflect that I handed to your clerk the affidavit of notice with the certified mail return receipts that are in the possession of the board right now as well. So
all the appropriate abutters were notified.
Oh, yeah, actually, we went overboard, and we noted that there were errors in some of the tax assessor's records. I've been working with the tax assessor on 2 development projects to correct those, but in addition to sending it out to the incorrect addresses, we also added the proper zip codes, and we doubled up even in excess of our requirements under the law, and we added extra people outside of that just because of the GIS mapping and whatnot. We wanted to be sure that the radius of the abutters included everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Privy?
Mr. Privy, do you have a pointer up at the podium there? Or you have your own? Okay.
One thing first. first, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Privy has testified here and before the board numerous times. He's testified in cities and
Correct.
towns all throughout the state of Rhode Island as an expert in the area of engineering, and I'm proffering him as an expert in engineering here this evening.
Do we need to make a motion on that, Mr. Marcel? We're familiar with them, or just for the record? Yeah, I'd feel better just that we do this for the expert. When somebody accept Mr. Privy as an expert?
Yeah, we accept the gentleman as an expert.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Privy.
Good evening. For the,
Oh, yeah. Yep. Everyone, that's right. Everyone needs to be sworn in. I didn't even mention that because you changed positions on me, so. Everyone needs to be sworn in except attorneys. I don't know why.
I do. My name is Eric Privy, P-R-I-V as in Victor E. I'm a registered professional engineer with DePreet Engineering, offices at 2 Stafford Court in Cranston, Rhode Island. What I'd like to do is kind of briefly go through what we've put together as a package. This is a conceptual master plan, so I think it's important to note that this is an early stage, right? This is not, you're not going to have the detailed engineering of all the stormwater calculations and such, but I want to be able to at least go through and tell you how we thought about it, how we placed these, how we've cited things, and how we went through it in that design process. Mike, can I go to the aerial? Do you have our aerial sheet number 2? Perfect, that's fine, thank you. Good enough. The site is a 6.1 acre parcel. It's located on Plat NB Lot 30A. It's zoned R80. There's about 605 feet of frontage, 605 feet of frontage along Old Boston Neck Road, so along the eastern side here. More generally, it's located in the northern section of the town. It's pretty much right on the border with North Kingstown. So you have Old Boston Neck Road here, and then you have Boston Neck Road, Route 1A over on this side, and where they converge is effectively right here at the North Kingstown town line as well. The parcel itself is just east of Boston Neck Road, so Route 1A located right here. And just north of kind of the split, you have Bridgetown Road and then South Ferry Road that goes off to the URI Bay Campus. So we're just north of that, just to kind of get everybody zoomed into the area. Some of the surrounding zoning in the area is R80. So this parcel is zoned R80. There's some R80 off to the east. Across Route 1, there's a mixture of R80, and then there's also some R10 located a little further west around here. And then to the south, there's some R40. There's a little areas of R40 and R80 as well. So I just wanted to kind of give a context of what the general densities and zoning are in the area as well. As far as the existing conditions, you can see from the aerial here, it's actually, that's a really good aerial to be able to tell what's going on here. So the parcel itself is kind of an open grass field for majority of the parcel. So as I mentioned, it's a 6-acre parcel with the frontage directly here on the eastern side. Again, this is Old Boston Neck Road on the eastern side. It runs in a north-south direction over here as well. There's some stone walls that are located along the eastern perimeter, directly along Old Boston Neck Road. There is some vegetation and some trees, some deciduous trees located along this eastern portion as well. But then you can see it opens up and there's kind of a grass field for majority of the site inland once you kind of get into the site a bit here. As you continue to go west, there's a row of cedar trees that are located along a path that kind of goes off to where there's an existing water line that comes under here, and it goes to the old rail line over here as well. So cedars, some existing stand over here along Old Boston Neck Road, and then the grass fields located here in the middle. Located in the southwestern portion over here, there is a deciduous forested wetland that's located in the southwestern portion over here. Based on the wetland size and type, according to the new regulations, it'll have a 75-foot buffer with it. That is approximately 0.1 of an acre, which is less than 2% of the entire site. So you can see where it comes into the southwest corner here versus the majority of the site over here. Given the freshwater wetland that's on the site, the parcel is located within the town's zoning ordinance, section 4.3, coastal and freshwater wetlands overlay district. I heard the item before discussed a little bit, some of the tweaks that are going to be going to that as well, but it is located in that as of today. There is no FEMA 100-year floodplain located on the site. This area is not located within the Coastal Resources Management Council's Narrow River Special Area Management Plan. It is not located within CRMC's Salt Pond Special Area Management Plan either. A little bit more about the soils themselves. We put on the USDA soil survey of Rhode Island, and a majority of the site is rainbow. It's a rainbow silt loam on the site. You can see the soils line, it's a little bit light on here, but the soils line is located right here, and majority of the site is all that rainbow silt loam internally here. And that is suitable for development. Groundwater tables within, the 18 to 30 range, 30-inch range, but absolutely capable and suitable for development. Given the rainbow silt loam that's on the site, the parcel is located within the town's zoning ordinance, section 4.5, the high water table limitations district, and that rainbow is a zone B, the district B version, which is the 18 to 36 range as well. Soil testing has been done on the site with the previous subdivision that came through as well. That was done back in about 2018, 2019. That was reviewed, witnessed by Department of Environmental Management, witnessed and verified by them, and approved by DEM. The original subdivision, there was a previous 3-lot subdivision that was approved. There was a site suitability that came with that as well in July of 2019, and that confirmed those groundwater table depths on site and the general suitability for the soils for housing of on-site wastewater treatment systems. Generally on the topography as well, it's tough to see because the lines for the topography are pretty dark on this plan, but generally speaking, it goes from west to east. So it's high on the left side of the page and it's rolling to the right. So it's going from Boston Neck Road over towards Old Boston Neck Road. And so it's the approximate elevations in this area. You have about a 120 elevation, 120 along the western side over here. And it goes down to 104, 104 along Boston Neck Road. So it is almost primarily goes all from west to east. There's not a separate watershed that flows to the north or pushes it to the south. There's a small ridge located here, and it all sheds from west to east towards Old Boston Neck Road. As far as utilities, the existing utilities, there are overhead utilities that are located along Old Boston Neck Road. Those utilities are located on the eastern side, so across the street from the site. Those overhead utilities are located there as well. There is no sanitary sewer system in this area. So this area is serviced by on-site wastewater treatment systems as well. There's no municipal water directly within Old Boston Neck Road. However, there is a 2-inch line that comes off. There's the water main that's located out in Boston Neck Road here, and there's a 2-inch line that comes in to service this existing home today. So there's a 25-foot easement that's associated with that as well. So no water located directly in Old Boston Neck today, but there is in Boston Neck Road. There are 2 culverts, drainage culverts, that are important to note as well. So there's a 12-inch corrugated plastic pipe that's located about 200 feet north of this corner here. So here's the property line corner, about 200 feet north of that. There is along Old Boston Neck Road a cross culvert here, and that's a 12-inch pipe that comes across. If you keep going further north here, there's a secondary pipe that's about 80 feet south of the northeastern property line here, and that is a 15-inch cast iron pipe right here as well. So there's 2 cross pipes along with a kind of a roadside ditch in this area that picks up the existing stormwater off of Old Boston Neck Road. I'm going to move to the proposed design if I can, Mike. Thank you. Proposed is, as attorney, sure.
Do you want to ask a question, Joe?
Yeah, the water that comes onto the adjacent property for fire purposes and for potable purposes? Is that going to be available?
So as of today, for existing conditions, there's only a 2-inch service that comes onto the site today. There's no fire protection, there's no, so I'll mention it on the proposed, coming in proposed, I'm not sure if that's what you're getting to, but there will be a 6-inch line that's run through to be able to put a hydrant at the entrance to be able to help service both this development and the surrounding area as well. So that's a proposed. Today as existing, there is not today.
There is not.
No. Thank you. As Attorney Doherty had said, there are, so it's 10 duplex buildings. You can see them located on here. So each one, well, obviously with the duplex, 2 units together there. That's a total of 20 units through the project here. With the comprehensive permit application, as mentioned, 25% of those are designated as low and moderate income housing. So that's 5 of these units will be located as low and moderate income units. All of the units are 2-bedroom units. So I think that's important from some of the town's perspective a lot of times with school kids and such. All units will have a minimum of a 1-car garage, and most are providing 2-car garages, as you can see from the graphic on here as well. As far as parking, we provided for the minimum, at least more than the minimum, of the 2 off-street parking spaces, with several more. If you include, we did not take credit for the garage spaces, but garage spaces in front of the units. And we did add in some extra reinforced grass paver sections here for some additional visitor parking spaces too, in case those are needed as well. So we have 20 visitor spaces, so 1 per unit to be able to come in for additional as well. And as I mentioned, those are grass, reinforced grass, so those are be able to still minimize the impervious surface that's on the site, but still provide some extra parking so people aren't parking all over the streets and adjacent streets and such.
Mr. Privy, real
Yeah,
quick.
sure.
Mr. Doherty, at pre-app, you said they'd be age-restricted? Is that still the? I'm sorry. At pre-app, you said they'd be age-restricted?
Well, we had offered that, but the board seemed to not.
Yeah, we weren't thrilled with age-restricted.
We wouldn't have a problem.
No, I don't, I'm trying to understand. You said they're 2 bedrooms each, but the 55 or older is off the table at this point.
Well, we'd be willing to work with that. No, I mean,
We didn't want that. I was trying to confirm if you were ignoring what we didn't want and coming back and saying it's still age-restricted.
no, we would be amenable to that, but we took the board's advice.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. The driveway itself, so it'd be private driveway coming through here. This is actually, if you recall, from the pre-application that came in, and there was a loop road that kind of pushed some of the units to the outside as well. We were able to streamline this now and just come in with a nice central corridor road here. It's a much better use to be able to have they call that a double loaded, when you're able to have kind of both sides of it and get more function of the units. So we have a single road coming in now. It's about 585 linear feet as a full-size cul-de-sac turnaround, so that fire apparatus and emergency vehicles and such can still get around in that area and come out as well. Water, we are proposing to upgrade that existing 2-inch line and make that a 6-inch line, come central into the site. That would come directly in and service these new units. It would also be extended all the way beyond these last units, so past number 1 and past number 20, right out to the edge of the right-of-way here, so that if there was ever in the future, it could connect to it. It'd be within the public right-of-way. And then also proposing that new hydrant here, so a proposed fire hydrant to be able to service this area. So that would service, because it would be in the public portion of the right-of-way in Old Boston Neck Road, that could service both this proposed development and some of the surrounding areas that do not currently have fire protection cisterns today. As far as septic systems, we've conceptually designed, again, we're at master plan stage, but we've conceptually designed 3 areas of community septic systems on site. I believe at pre-app there was some concerns about having a single location, so we've spaced it out to 3 different locations on site. Oops. Got lost my pointer here. Got it? Maybe?
Poltergeist.
I got it, thank you.
got it?
Thank you, though. The on-site wastewater treatment systems are all shown throughout. These would all be denitrification septic systems. As mentioned, because they're two-bedroom dwellings, you would have a four-bed combined for each building. They could have their own Advantex pod right here, treated directly at the source, and that would come to community systems. So we have 3 locations for the leach field. So each building itself would have its own Advantex pod, and then it would go to the community system here that would be broken up. Again, there's 3 different locations, and we generally cited them in the locations of where those the previously approved testing was located as well. Again, a lot of work needs to be done in the future when it gets into the detailed engineering and making sure that the Department of Environmental Management is satisfied with all of the designs of those systems. But we feel highly confident that these will be able to be sited directly on site following the on-site wastewater treatment system regulations. As far as stormwater, again, we're at master plan stage, so there's a lot to go along the way. We have calculations to do. We have to show the grading. We have to show all those things to you at the preliminary plan stage. But we wanted to conceptually show something that's realistic out here, not have a tiny pond that, we know will never work. So we have a pond. We have a location for a basin on site here. And this is located in the eastern portion over here. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, the topography is all shown from rolling from west-east, so we're able to pick it up towards the bottom here, directly on site and bring into this area. Also really important to note is that the roof leaders here will tie in. We have locations for systems directly next to the units here. You can see there's a little blue areas next to each of the units to be able to take those roof leaders and put that right at the source here. That's one of the Department of Environmental Management's low-impact developments. As much as you can break that up instead of having everything coming to a central location in one treatment area, if we can break this watershed up into smaller areas, you take all that roof runoff, and that now becomes, instead of being nuisance runoff that goes overland, it's directly right there at the source. It's not creating that nuisance water. Also, a couple rain gardens here at the entrance that we had put here. And the reason for these rain gardens that are at this entrance is we feel that given some of the locations of the primary treatment over here with the basin, it's going to be able to pick up most of it, but there's going to be a small strip right here that's not going to be able to get back to this basin over here. So we put these here as a place to be able to put some water quality treatment right here before it goes off site and into the adjacent existing swales here as well. One of the important things that we did when we were siting this pond as well, this basin over here, was we didn't want to push it too far. As much as we could keep pushing it to the east, we wanted to hold that so that we can keep this existing stand over here and supplement the screening and trees along Old Boston Neck Road. We understand that people that drive by Old Boston Neck Road and or live in the general vicinity, visual appearance is probably one of the most important things. So if we go and put the pond there, that's going to take the grades that are going to strip that area. So we've pushed this back over to the west a little more in order to be able to leave the existing trees as much as possible and then supplement that. We'll do that with a comprehensive landscape plan that you'll see at the next stage, but supplement that with some additional screening here along the eastern side as well. As mentioned, the drainage will be designed to meet DEM's best management practices using low-impact development. We do have to, as by state law, we are required to show that all of the stormwater on the site has a decrease in or no net increase in stormwater from pre to post development from the 2 to 100-year storm. So that's a requirement that we have. So it cannot be. Just going to look at my notes and see if there's some of the other enhancements as well. We had put some additional buffering along the adjacent parcels as well. We've got some vegetative buffering that we're providing along the north here. Again, there's an existing home that's located here. We've provided that. One of the things we also did is the previous unit had some of the units kind of bumped back out into this area at the pre-app. We've tucked those back in. We've tucked those in, and even though this is our parcel of land, we understand that this is somebody's backyard here, and we want to be able to provide this area to be able to stay kind of as it is today. So we're being cognizant of the neighbors and what they have today. So we're buffering along this area and leaving this area. We're not proposing any new units up in this area. Similar to here, there's kind of a funky shape that's here that happened with the original subdivision. I'm not sure the thought process, but either way, there's a funky angle that kind of comes in here, along here. we're proposing to be able to straighten that out in this area. We're not proposing anything in this area, and that could kind of straighten out this area and possibly be of use for the yard that's already there today, and use it that way. So, and providing some extra buffering in that area as well.
But you, excuse me.
Sure.
You'd retain ownership of that triangle, but you just wouldn't put anything in it, right?
Correct.
You wouldn't, okay.
And then rebuilding the stone wall along the entrance. So majority of the frontage has a stone wall along it. Parts of it are starting to fall apart. We would propose as part of this, rebuild the stone wall along the entirety of the frontage here, obviously other than the entrance, the roadway, the driveway that needs to come in. But other than that, it would be rebuilt for the majority of the frontage. So you'd have a nice stone wall appearance along here to kind of match as if you were driving down the corridor. Future work, if the project was to be granted approval, we have a lot of work to go. This is a master plan, conceptual plan stage. I tried to go through and give an overview of our thought process when we did, but preliminary plan level plans would have, all of the comprehensive engineering design that you would see at the next stage. Grading, drainage, utility designs, all of those very more comprehensive things. We'd be developing the stormwater management reports. We'd be developing the soil erosion and sediment control reports. We'd be putting together the operations and maintenance plans for all those. So we have a lot of work to do still. And it's one thing I always like to say at the master plan. I know you guys are familiar with it as well, but to also tell people that may have not come to a planning board meeting before is this is the first stage, and this is the first time they've been noticed. There will be opportunities for them to speak, obviously, hopefully tonight if we have time, and then also at future stages as well. When more information comes out for detailed engineering and such, there'll be opportunities for that as well. Future permits that would be needed too, if this were to move on. We acknowledge that we would have to go and get a CRMC freshwater wetlands in the vicinity of the coast. So we would need to get that in the future. That's a state permit that we would have to get. We would have to get the DEM on-site wastewater treatment system designs. All of those would need to get approved before we came back and with the detailed engineering. And then preliminary plan stage, again, if this is able to move on, the preliminary plan stage, which would have all of those details and provided to the town engineer and provided, and anything that is submitted is available for neighbors to be able to come see and look at the documents themselves as well. So we have a lot of steps to go. We feel like we've put our best foot forward into thinking about the things that are going to be needed at that next stage, but at the same point, providing you an overview of kind of the conceptual master plan that we have. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if I didn't cover anything.
Thanks, appreciate it. Anyone have any specific question? We'll go to Mr. Doherty's next expert, unless you have a specific question.
I'll be here if you find something, so.
Okay. And the public, Mr. Privy's point is well taken. This is master plan. This is where the units are vested if it passes, but preliminary stage is next, and then the final stage, and that a lot of the engineering that you'll be able to review doesn't have to be submitted until preliminary, and it will be.
Yeah, I got a question I feel relevant to the stage.
Sure.
Yeah, you came in with five units affordable, and 15 are market, correct?
Right.
Yeah, you reduced this plan by 1 unit, and it was an affordable unit. Why? I mean, if this was about affordable housing and benefiting the town, why do we reduce it by, I mean, yeah, it's 25%. It's still a minimal number of housing. Why did we take that one away? I mean, that's the value of this project, isn't it? Is the affordable housing. You chose to take 1 unit away because we talked about the density. That was a concern at our first meeting. And 1 unit got taken away, okay. But it was an affordable unit. And I don't understand why.
I'm a civil engineer, so I'm not, I can tell you from a siting perspective that we were looking to put a layout together as far as tucking it. Again, a lot of these units were sprawled out behind where this existing unit was.
I understand that.
So it had something to do with siting as well. It
So
did, by the time we were able to.
affordable units would have had a bigger
Okay, one at a
footprint.
time, guys. Let him finish his statement, okay? Go ahead.
By the time we went through with the siting of it as well, putting together the duplexes and we're putting the infrastructure improvements, making sure we're leaving more than adequate enough space for stormwater treatment. I've heard of concerns of existing stormwater concerns in the area, so we're trying to make sure we have all of that on the site. So it's the unit that came off. I don't have any other answer other than that.
I mean, you could have come in with 10 units total. I mean, this was the number you picked, right?
Thank you, yes.
15 and 5, okay. Mr. Daugherty, you want to move to another witness? We'll probably call, will Mr. Privy be back on the 26th? All right, so if we have questions.
Yeah, I'll make myself available. I'll be here next Wednesday too, or as well.
Right,
So-
okay, great. So, sure.
Point of information,
Yep,
Mr.
go
Chair,
ahead.
just for expediency and the people here and stuff like that, would you like us to reserve our questions till the next meeting? Would that be more efficient?
No, not necessarily. I think if you need something clarified, but I'd like to get through as much of Mr.
Yeah, I mean,
Daugherty's
yeah, you-
expert testimony as we
If-
can.
Certainly, if a question comes up as
Yeah.
they're speaking, don't hesitate to,
Ask
ask
the
it
question
now.
for
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
But I think if we want to start taking positions or I mean, there's going to be time for that before we make our decision. So I'd like to get as much on the record as possible.
Perfectly fine with addressing any of the concerns.
No, I know.
And I think it's important that you don't, sometimes in these course of these things, you forget to ask. And then, I mean, if it's on your mind now, please feel
No,
free, it's right here.
we'll ask clarification. But then I think we're going to have more discussion coming back. Okay, thanks. Who's next?
Thank you.
I have Tim Tuig, who's a wetlands person. If you would come on up here.
I do. It's Tim Tuhig, Twouhig.
Now, Mr. Tuig, could you please tell the board what you do for a living?
So I am a wetland and soil scientist. I work for Dupree Engineering, and I'm usually tasked with going out to wetlands, characterizing them, establishing relevant buffer zones under the new regulations for DEM and CRMC, and also analyzing soils, partly for wetland science and then also for drainage.
What sort of certifications and degrees do you hold in the area of wetlands?
So I have a undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree and a Master of Science degree, both from URI, generally in environmental science, but my area of concentration was in soil and wetlands.
And how long have you been engaged?
I'm sorry, one other thing, and I'm also a Class 4 Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management soil evaluator.
And how long have you been engaged in work concerning wetlands and soils?
So there is a brief, fairly lengthy hiatus, but the beginning is about 3 years, and then I worked in public education for 15 years, and then I've recently come back into the environmental field for another year.
Okay. But you currently hold certification with the state of Rhode Island, and you're able to identify
Yes.
wetlands and soils and
Yes.
flag the perimeters thereof for
Correct.
final approval by the state regulating agencies?
Yes.
Okay. I'm presenting him as a person, as an expert in wetlands.
Okay, would someone make a motion to accept Mr. Tuig?
Move to accept.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead, Mr. Tuig.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Which one's the pointer?
I think this one was what Eric was using.
Not working.
You guys need one?
Oh, there we go. I got this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, I was tasked with visiting the site this past February to verify that existing wetland lines that were established in some previous years. And so I went to the site, did a site characterization, and the previous wetland area was marked on here. And my findings were consistent with what was there. There were still some, what you would call like nubs of previous wetland flagging that were there. In some places, I adjusted the line, sometimes more conservative, sometimes more aggressively. But in general, the line was consistent with what was previously there. Again, following the 3 protocols for wetland delineation. So that includes soils, vegetation, and hydrology. And so The wetland plants that were seen in the southwestern area were typical species ubiquitous in wetlands in the state, red maple, soft rush. There were a couple other plants, upland plants that were on higher parts directly next to the easement, Norway maple. And then on the upland side, before the standard juniper trees, there were other upland species. So that was able to give me a good calibration for where I place my wetland line. And then I verified that with soil, and so I would use a soil auger to probe into the ground, typically to 18 inches to 2 feet. And on the wetland side, I found hydric soils, which would mean, for the most part, it would be dark organic layers, and then subsoil horizons that would have more gray colors to them. And that was what I witnessed in this entire western area. Flags were hung, they were recorded with a handheld GPS, differentially corrected to make them more accurate once back at the office, and then submitted to the engineers for inclusion into the plans.
So the only wetland that you defined on this proposed development is in the southwest corner?
Correct. There was an old plan that had a very small wetland in this area, most of it extending onto this neighboring northern house. I investigated that area. I did find some wetland vegetation, mostly red maple, which is ubiquitous in the state. It has a National Wetland Indicator status of FAC, which means it has an equal opportunity of being found in wetlands or in upland. Some of the other plants in that area were typical invasive species, things like privet, multiflora rose. Those are usually upland species, mostly with an indicator status of FAC up or even drier, usually meaning that they're found in uplands about 60% to 90% of the time. And then the soils in this area, and again, this is this extreme northeastern corner, that was consistent with upland soil. I did not see any indicators of hydric soil in that area, and that was with multiple soil probings. And then a site walk throughout the rest of this wooded area and in the field area did not reveal any wetlands.
So did you get your wetland delineation verified?
It is in process now. So we have a request to verify wetland edge out with CRMC that's pending. So we're awaiting their biologist report.
And did you look at the soils in the area where the bottomless sand filter is indicated on here?
So the areas down in here?
Yep.
I did not look at the soils in that area. So as I walked the site, it was vegetation is kind of what gets you into the right area, and then you can confirm your findings with soil in that area. So I did not do any soil sampling in that area, but I think we do have some witness testing in this area that had water tables at 18 inches, and that's usually not going to establish wetland vegetation. Usually you're looking for water tables that are greater than 12 inches.
Tim? Mr. Chairman, can I just ask a question?
Absolutely.
Could you verify again when you did that work?
That was in mid-February. I believe the exact date was February 16th of this year, yes.
Was it, Mr. DeLuca, was there some concern or question about that in your staff report?
Yes, there was.
About the timeliness of those?
It was not necessarily, well, yeah, about the timeliness because, well, I had asked for a verified wetland edge back in December.
Which is still
and
pending, right?
It didn't get submitted to me. What I'm hearing now is that the work wasn't done until just 2 months ago.
Right.
So, and it was well understood that the previous wetland edge was expired because they only have a 3-year shelf life, and that the applicant was aware of that. Just wanted to ask that.
So that's still with the state? The wetland
The
edge?
current edge that I...
The verification of the
Yes.
wetland edge, okay.
The latest status for CRMC said that it was being reviewed.
Okay, go ahead. Anything else?
I have nothing else.
Nothing else. Anyone have any more questions for him? No?
I do have a question.
Mhm.
Mr. Truitt, do you believe that based upon...
Mr. Doherty, can you get
Oh, I'm sorry,
closer
sure.
to the thing?
Mr. Chuig, do you believe, based upon your review of the flagging and the wetlands and the soil samples that you've done, that this project would have a negative impact on any wetland system?
I do not. So part of my task with delineating the wetland is also then verifying what the established buffer zone for, in regard to DEM or CRMC for these wetlands. And so it does have this southwestern wetland does have a 75-foot buffer zone. Even though it's a very small wetland on site, it is part of a larger wetland system, greater than 10 acres. And so that gives it the 75-foot buffer zone. There would be no direct impacts to the wetland. The actual, when we were saying that we would have to apply for a permit, that's because there were proposed project within jurisdictional area. That is just an area where CRMC or DEM has jurisdiction, where if there's activity, they want to oversee it and make sure that there are minimal impacts. As Eric mentioned, all of the site drainage goes to the east, so any stormwater wouldn't really have any potential to go towards the wetland. Everything would be directed to the east, and then there's also the rooftop systems that would be catching stormwater and discharging it properly. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have Edward Pimentel, who I would also ask that Mr. Pimentel be accepted as an expert in planning and zoning. He's testified before just about every board in the state of Rhode Island numerous times.
Yep, absolutely. Dr. O'Neill?
Yep. Move and be accepted as an expert in this field.
All those in favor? Aye. Go ahead, Mr. Pimentel. Oh, yeah.
I do. Edward Pimentel, for the record, it's P as in Paul, Imentel. Thank you. So for edification of the members of the planning board, been an urban planner for in excess of 30 years, continuous municipal planner, zoning official. I've been consulting for a little over 22 years. Started one of my first projects was in the affordable housing area, probably under the initial statute, and then there was changes in 2004. And probably in the last several years, I would say 1/3 to 1/2 of my consulting has all been great degree of residential development, and a good portion of that is affordable housing. There's such a demand for housing in the state that it pretty much occupies most of my time, more than even commercial industrial development. Just in the last 6 months, I think I've worked on 4 or 5 or 6 different affordable housing projects throughout many communities. Anecdotally, because I know it came up from Mr. Fleming about the 55 plus and so forth. Some of these developments we're doing, interestingly enough, and I know this is anecdotal information, but towns of Lincoln and other communities, the minute the COs are issued, in-town residents are occupying these smaller 2-bedroom units. There's such a high demand for them. What's happening in the state is a lot of the people who have long roots in their community are, as we say, land rich, cash poor, and they're being kicked out of their own municipalities, the communities that they've established roots, and they're just filling in the void of these units and then selling those homes off. So it creates a market for those homes and allows them to remain within their community. There's such a dire need for affordable housing in the state. It just came out in the news, we're 50 out of 50 states for home construction. So lack of supply is creating demand, creates affordability issues. So owner-occupied units are probably the hardest to provide. Clearly, the hardest to provide is true single-family homes on their own lots. They're just not affordable because the density bonuses that you would require from a subdivision perspective doesn't pay for itself. So very few people engage in that. Rentals, I do a lot of it. It's a lot easier, but there's a huge supply of those. It's these kind of smaller-sized owner-occupied units, these 2-bedroom units, that are in just greatest demand. So I know this board does its due diligence and goes through my report, so I'll try to consolidate and try to utilize my report kind of as a map for this. The property is zoned 2 acres, and we all know what causes angst in affordable housing is the density. People can't grab their arms around, you're entitled to X amount of units, how can you be proposing Y units? I understand it, It's probably the number one problem. You try to convey why we need the density so that you can realize provision of affordable housing. All people know is that this is a 2-acre zone. It's a 6-acre lot. Now, the greatness of this lot is that it appears to be constraint-free. I have to rely on my own experts, but it does appear to be constraint-free. But still, regardless, you're looking at a density of 3 units that would be entitled versus we're asking for 20 units, and people just can't get their hands around that. Zoning, and this is where I want to get into this, zoning comes in 2 forms, traditionally. A, zoning gets imposed upon an area because of the way it has historically been developed. You come across an area that's been historically developed in a high-density fashion, you apply a high-density residential zoning designation. Areas that are sparse, we have certain information, anecdotal information about those areas, we impose a much lower density residential. There's no question that there are wetland constraints located throughout the northern portion of Narragansett, and there are other site characteristics that you want to protect. So what did we do? You impose a 2-acre zoning on the whole area, clearly acknowledging that there's going to be pockets that can accommodate greater intensity. This is one of those pockets. When you find an area like this, knowing the great need for affordable housing, knowing how difficult this community has been in establishing affordable housing, and that's not an insult to the community. It's true across most of the communities in Rhode Island. In 2004, only a handful of communities complied. Here we are 20 years later, after all those communities that didn't comply adopted an affordable housing plan. The same grouping of communities have yet to comply. A few are close, but most have remained stagnant. It's difficult. The town of Narragansett was approximately, I believe it was 2.9 pursuant to your affordable housing plan. Yep, you were 2.9 in 2000. Well, this would have been the revised 2005 affordable housing plan. You were 2.9. I think you're approximately 3.76 or 3.86 now. So you've moved about a percentage point in 20 years. I'm sure there's been blips along the way, but the reality is you've gained a percentage in affordable housing over 20 years. Once again, that's not causing or trying to imply that this community doesn't believe in affordable housing. All communities believe. You do your best. You have limited land resources. You're trying to accommodate the density that you can accommodate. When we find pockets like this is where we need to concentrate and need to support greater density. We will have to prove at the prelim stage, there's no question, we will have to prove that this can be engineered and that the appropriate infrastructure can be introduced. But if that can be accomplished, we need to accommodate greater densities. We need to understand that zoning is the arbitrary component to this, and that's proven by the statutory standards for the granting of an affordable housing development. If you look at the statutory standards, they almost mirror a land development and a subdivision, right? The property, you have to be constraint-free. You got to protect wherever there's unique characteristics or site characteristics, environmental characteristics. You have to provide the appropriate infrastructure. But what is the one real exception? And that is zoning. Zoning is subjugated to a waiver, and it's not even the standards of the waiver that would be in your subdivision regulations. The barometer is the provision of affordable housing, and even in this past legislative cycle, they made it even more difficult for a municipality to realize the rendering of a denial, if you're so inclined to do so, we hope not, and that is now the municipality must make a finding of significant progress in achieving affordable housing compliance. That is the new statutory standard. There's even language out there for this next cycle, I don't know what the likelihood of it is, that the state now says we may take it over and put a state board in charge of affordable housing. I don't think municipalities want to lose their rights, hopefully not. Every municipality knows best and has the strategies for accommodating affordable housing. We wouldn't want to see that happen. But the reality is we need to densify these pockets where additional and greater housing can be adopted and accommodated. I did an analysis from 2004 straightforward to today, just plotting the provision of affordable housing in the town of Narragansett, and there's been blips up and down. But like I said, you're probably about 1 percentage point gain over 20 years. I know there's been a few projects approved several years ago that are in the pipeline, have yet to be constructed. I don't know what the likelihood of those are being constructed, but the reality is this is where we are today. We need affordable housing.
Can I just interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
Just let me interrupt real quick. Have you done the math as the five affordables and the 15 market? What is that? Where does that move our percent from what to what? Did anybody do that math?
Yeah, I did actually. I mean, the movement is small, but I
I can imagine it's small.
Well, but that's the problem. But
No,
that's,
I- no,
no,
I know.
I understand, no, look, no, it's true.
I'm
I-
just trying to determine what the 5 units in
It would be- it would be-
conjunction with the
Yeah, it
15
would be,
markets
well,
becomes.
when you consider that we're adding 20 units into the overall housing stock.
Get that.
And we got offset to 2 units, we end up adding 3 units towards the provision. It moves it just the needle very, very slow.
Okay.
But that's the problem with affordable housing in its general. Every time I come, and I've worked on many of these, we put forward a very, very dense project. The first thing we do is we get squeezed down. It doesn't see the light of day. So you start to squeeze it down, the affordability component gets squeezed down. I work with one developer, this is more anecdotal information. I work with one developer who was doing very dense projects, had the ability, buying large acreage. Because of the construction costs and because of the interest rates now, he goes, I'm out of it. Now it's just a total loss because you can never realize the density you need to move that needle and substantially. So this is where we are. If we cut back, all we ended up with is less affordability and not moving the needle at all. That's the problem.
Go ahead.
I know the
Did you
gentleman
have
had a
something?
question.
Yeah, my question was the same vein. I mean, probably not the brightest guy up here. But when I sit there and do the math, I sit here and we've got 20 units, 5 units affordable, 15 units market. Do we actually move forward or do we go backwards? I mean, don't the 15 units really overshadow the 5 and dilute it down to nothing?
I
No,
think
well-
I think it marginally increases.
Yeah, you actually got to consider the full 20 units.
So then my question again goes back to, we reduced this project by 1 unit. Why did we reduce the affordable housing? Why didn't we reduce a market, keep the affordable housing, and at least try to make some sort of market gain in affordable housing in this community? It's just,
Mr. Brady, I have no counter argument to that because as a proponent of affordable housing, if the numbers worked, because I can't speak to the pro forma, that is not my field of expertise.
Right, we'll talk about the pro forma
Right,
down the
my
road.
is, if, I've worked for also 100% nonprofits doing it.
Right.
Easy sell, right? Because every unit contributes to meeting the 10% regulatory compliance.
Right.
And I want to set that 10% aside. You know why? Because that was an arbitrary number that was thrown at every community. We at the state, we always discuss that. Why that arbitrary number? There are some communities that need far greater than 10%. And there are some communities that don't even need the full 10%. So that is such an arbitrary number. We really do need to be meeting our individual needs. So it's great when I can do 100% nonprofit, when the subsidized funding is there, because there's no counter argument. It's all a benefit to the community.
Okay.
But the reality is, and it's in your comprehensive plan, the number one way that this community has realized affordable housing is through the compromise process. I know I'm going a little fast, I apologize. Is the
She's good, but
No,
you
no,
gotta
no,
slow
no,
down a
no,
little.
no, I know, I got the eyeball. Is the compromise process, and it's the reality is it's from the for-profit sector. So there's got to be a offsetting density bonus. Otherwise, we're not going to realize provision of any affordable
All
housing.
right, we can debate the ratio, but the point is, I think, the question I asked, which I think Mark also is it's only moving the needle slightly. Theoretically,
Yeah.
and I don't want to get into the numbers don't work.
Understood.
If we built 10 affordables and no market, it would move the needle more.
If this property, and I don't want to say something that people are going to think that I'm actually proposing something new, because I'm not proposing anything new. But if this property could accommodate even a greater density, if it could accommodate 30 units, and we
Not
could do
necessarily
20
greater
and 10.
density, a greater ratio towards affordable.
Correct. I could easily support that.
We can debate
But-
that as we go.
But as this board knows, there's a lot of factors that go into this. There is the economics of it. It's got to be economically feasible. There is the component that's probably the most predominant, and is, can this be properly engineered? We got to make sure about the site constraints, the infrastructure. If you can't engineer it, it can't be developed, or it can't be developed at a certain density. That comes at the next phase. The problem is we can't get there to prove that until we get it conceptually.
We can talk about the pro forma later. So go ahead, Mr. Pimentel.
So I don't know if there was any additional questions. Yeah, well, you mean the significant.
Did staff have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
And I'll
yeah,
ask.
I just wanted to put some information into the record, because we are establishing a record. So like I said, I analyzed a lot of regulatory documents. I went back all the way to the 2004 Affordable Housing Plan that was revised in 2005. I fully understand, as you do your new iterations of your comprehensive plans, the housing element is basically the new iteration of that, because you update your numbers, you update your strategies and so forth. But why I thought this was so pertinent was that it was detailed then in your 2005 revised 2005 Affordable Housing Plan, how they concluded then that 89.6% of the development potential of the land has already been achieved, and even the remaining 10% portions of that are going to be constrained. There was even an expectation then that you would be fully built out by 2020. Now, clearly, that hasn't happened, but I think common sense would tell you that in the last 20 years, some degree of land consumption has occurred. We've moved the needle only a little bit. Good quantity of the land resources have been consumed. How are we going to achieve the 10%? Maybe it will not be achievable, but how do we achieve provision of affordable housing if we don't start densifying pockets like this? That is my argument to this board.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Go ahead.
You have a broad experience in this, and this is just idle curiosity on my part. Do you find that the proposals that include affordable are really to get the densities into smaller yachts and just using affordable to accommodate those higher densities where typically they wouldn't be able to zone for 20 units or 10 units or 15 units or whatever?
So that was absolutely true under the initial statute. Under the initial statute prior to 2004, there were people seeking density bonus 1,000%. They were using it for windfall purposes, is what you're stating. So in 2004 is when they told the communities, because like I said, there was only a handful. There was a few that had the 10%, and then there was a few that fell under the Pawtucket rule. The Pawtucket rule was, why do we need to meet 10% when we have so much rental housing that we can show affordability? Communities like Providence, East Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls fell under that. More recently, in my own community, we are building so much housing. Just in the last couple of years, we've approved over 1,000 residential units, but a lot of that is, there's a great need for the smaller rental efficiency units, and they're getting filled in as they get built, that we lowered ourselves for the first time. So we just got 4 affordable housing projects approved and got us back over the 10%. So we're one of the few communities that fell below, we're above. But what happened in 2004 is the communities went to the state and said, this is unfair. These people are using this for windfall purposes. And that's when the community said, you know what? We know best what our needs are, we know best what our strategies are, and we want to set up a game plan. And that's when the statute was amended and people adopted, well, the communities that had not comported adopted an affordable housing plan. But here we are 20 years later, and a lot of those communities have pretty much remained stagnant, and the needle's not moving. So now we're back to, we need to densify the areas that can be densified.
Okay, thanks, appreciate that.
Anything else? We can get back to Mr. Pimentel next month, next. You're going to be here on the 26th?
26th. I'll be here the 26th as well.
All right, thank you.
I just have a couple of pro forma questions for Mr. Pimentel as well.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like the board to acknowledge receipt of his report that was prepared in connection with this, which has in greater detail. It's dated 15th of February.
5th December.
Or 15th of December.
Is that the one in our file? Yes, sir. Okay,
2020.
we've got it.
I'd like that to be marked as an exhibit.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Pimentel, I just would like to ask you a couple of questions.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Doctor, I apologize. Mr. Pimentel, I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions with regard to the findings that we have here. Do you believe that the master plan development as proposed is consistent with the local needs as identified in the Narragansett Local Comprehensive Community Plan, with particular emphasis on the community's affordable housing plan, and has it satisfactorily addressed the issues where there may be inconsistencies?
Right, so when I purposely, and my methodology is always to include a needs section in my report. The needs section not only addresses the criteria, meaning the actual figure and numbers, how much will this move, how much percentage do you need, where have you been over the last several years, but there's also a specific identification of need. And there's like 6 categories here. You've got owner, rental, you've got special needs, you've got elderly, you've got families. Throughout your comprehensive plan, particularly your housing element, you talk about these starter homes, people downsizing. This is the greatest need, this style of home. It does address that in your comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Now, with regard to the proposed development, do you believe that it's in compliance with the standards and provisions of the municipal zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, or where it is varied and there are waivers requested, do you believe that that the local concerns have been addressed with regard to the relief that is sought to be granted, such that they do not outweigh the state and local need for low and moderate income housing?
Right, so there's waivers being sought from the engineering perspective too. The waivers that I looked at were those that would have been more in my line of expertise. And the one that leads the list, of course, is going to be density. An affordable housing plan, a comprehensive plan. I've never done one, unless it was a nonprofit, that ever comports with density. It just simply doesn't because of the affordability component and the need for a density bonus. Once again, given the dire need for affordable housing, given the success of the town of Narragansett over the last 20 years, given the new statutory requirement that you must evidence significant compliance, I think these waivers are very appropriate, especially the density waiver.
Now, Mr. Pimentel, do you believe that the town of Narragansett is adequately meeting its affordable housing needs as it currently stands?
No, it greatly needs a lot more affordable housing.
And is this proposal consistent with the affordable housing plan, in your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, once again, the town of Narragansett doesn't specifically or expressly detail exact locations like some of the other communities have. We want affordable housing in this location. I just handed in a report in North Smithfield. We're rehabbing one of the mills where they specifically wanted affordable housing in that. That made the job very easy. Town of Narragansett doesn't specifically say this property at this ratio, but what it does talk about, and I totally concur, is that you don't want to impact sites that may have environmental constraints or the inability to provide the appropriate infrastructure. That will have to be evidenced. I wouldn't support a development like that. That's why these pockets are so unique.
And with regard to Narragansett at the present time, based upon your analysis of the number of affordable units and what's in the pipeline as well, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Narragansett has made significant progress in implementing the affordable housing plan mandated by the Rhode Island General Assembly?
Once again, I mean, if we just take into consideration units that are operational, they've moved 1% in 20 years. If you were to consider some of these other developments, it's in the comprehensive plan. Even if they're in the low fives, then they've moved 2 percentage points, maybe 2.25 percentage points in 20 years. My humble professional opinion, that's not significant progress.
Now, with respect to this proposal, do you believe that it is consistent with local needs, including the needs identified in the current approved comprehensive plan?
Yes.
How about the needs that are identified in the local zoning ordinance, especially with respect to affordable?
Once again, because of the way they're treated as waivers, and these are not variances, they're not burdens to be met, yes, the answer is yes.
All right. Now, with respect to the proposal, it's your opinion that the town of Narragansett has not met their minimum of 10% of affordable housing at the present time? That's a given, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you think that this makes a significant step forward in adding to the affordable housing?
I mean, it's going to move the needle. It's only going to move the needle a small component. I can't deny that. But the point is, these types of units, every one you put into the market will be consumed immediately. There's such a great need for it.
Very good. I have nothing further, Mr. Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. Pimentel. Do you have any other experts tonight, Mr.?
No, I do not. Not this evening.
Can I just ask a question of Mr. DeLuca, Mr. Marcel, or Mr. Doherty? When do we, because we are master, preliminary, et cetera, when do we discuss the financial pro forma? Is it part of this phase?
Yes,
We did
part of this
submit-
phase.
We did submit I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I'm just saying it'll be part of this process. So we'll leave it to Mr. Doherty to do his presentation, and then we will follow up and respond.
Okay.
Yes, we did submit for the board's review a fiscal impact study that was done by Joseph Lombardo, another American Institute of Certified Planning expert, who has done numerous studies such as this in connection with the Low and Moderate Income Housing Act, the comprehensive permit applications. He's not available this evening. We're going to try and get him here.
Would he be here the next time?
I would hope so, yeah.
I would like to understand that.
Sure.
I didn't see any attribution by anybody in what was in our package. It seemed to be, the financial pro forma, it seemed to be without signature or,
Right. I was going to ask the question at one point or another, who authored that?
yeah. I'm just telling you, Mr. Doherty, what's in
fiscal
our,
impact study?
what's in our package was just a 1 or 2 page
Yeah.
financial spreadsheet, but
Well,
it didn't
that's
really say who
unusual.
it was
I had
from.
a 17-page report that we believe was.
Mike?
The fiscal impact statement has to do with,
Yeah, I was referring to the study that.
yes, by Mr. Lombardo.
And do
But
you
there's a
have that in?
one-page pro forma that was also accompanying the Rhode Island housing letter of eligibility that was sent to us.
Okay, all right, well,
And that is not signed or qualified
No
in
one's,
any manner.
no one's name's on it, so.
yeah, we'll have a witness addressing that.
Okay, well, I'd like to go over that.
Yeah,
So
of
if you
course.
could prepare for that for the 26th.
Does that also include traffic engineer?
Oh, yeah, traffic engineer will be here.
On the
26th,
26th.
Mr. Bannon, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have no one else tonight.
No one else this evening, just due to these scheduling
So then,
constraints.
we discussed, Mr. Marcella, there's an attorney representing one or more of the neighbors who's going to present after you're done on the 26th, I think, because he's not prepared to do it tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like
Yeah,
to,
I
if Mr. Perry can come up and since we're kind of in the.
Mr. Parry, could you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Ed Parry, P-A-R-E, and I represent 2 of the abutters. The chairman is correct. That is the plan where, after my brother rests, we intend to present expert testimony at the next hearing. I don't know if the board wants to take public comment and then bounce around.
Well, that's what I want to ask Mr. Marcella.
Yeah, so given that, we have 2 options, whether we can certainly take public comment tonight. However, anything new that is then introduced by Mr. Doherty or Mr. Perry on the next week we would have to take additional public comment on that. So we would have to have a second round of public comment for people who commented tonight, or a first round if people wanted to wait. So you certainly can on the limited testimony that's been presented, but I would advise the audience that they should come back, that there's going to be additional testimony next week, and they would have the right and the ability to comment after both Mr. Doherty's experts testify and Mr. Parry's experts testify also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but I don't want this board to stop the ability of certain
No.
people who couldn't make it next week and they came tonight. Certainly, we have time.
So
I thought we'd be here until 11
I
o'clock.
did too.
tonight,
So I would offer to the people what Mr. Marcella said. If you want to get up and speak, you would have 3 minutes to speak. But if you came back on the 26th and there was additional information, you
would have-
could get up and speak on that additional information, and I'd be pretty
Yes, absolutely.
tough on you to make sure that you can find your comments to the new information. Some of you may not be able to come back next week and you want to get on the record. Tonight would be a good time to give your 3 minutes, get it on the record. It's all being recorded. It's being recorded there, it's being recorded there. And also, folks, between now and next Wednesday, if you want to submit information in writing, position, we received one communication today that Ms. Sabo will pass out to the board and to both attorneys, so they'll have copies. But if you want to submit something in writing, believe me, the board reads everything. We take it into account. Sometimes the arguments, pro or con, are more effective in writing than they are orally. So that's your call. But if you get up tonight, I would say anybody who can't come next week, probably get your comments on the record tonight. But if you do come back next week, you could, and speak tonight, you can only comment on the new information, not on anything that's been said to date.
So, I mean, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to obviously reserve to speak next week, probably at some length.
Yeah, you're not held to 3, again, lawyers get other kinds of consideration, so you can make a presentation
Correct,
longer
and-
than 3 minutes.
Yeah, and if you had any experts, Ed, you'd be allowed
Yeah,
to
you can
present them also.
present expert.
And just on that point, I know we heard some testimony tonight about site soil samples that may have been conducted during testing from February of this year. I understand, I'm going to have some questions about the pro forma as well, the identity of that person. That person may or may not come to testify. I would just suggest that if the board is considering retaining a peer review expert for the pro forma, we are certainly intending on bringing expert testimony of our own, or if the board is considering environmental experts of its own, that we would take the time to continue this beyond the 26th to a date not far out into the future, but to make sure that we're just properly vetting.
I'm not sure we have the luxury of going beyond the 26th, to be honest with you.
I
I
just
think
wanted to put
we need to come back next Wednesday, and unless there's a meeting of the minds, we're going to make a decision that night.
Understood.
Okay? That's why I think it was a good suggestion to put this on the agenda tonight, to get it started, to get some of the expert witnesses on the record, to get some of the public, because we're going to be here for a long time on the 26th. Okay, and you'll be able to present your expert witnesses at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Perry, thank you. So, does anyone, before we go to the board for any last comments, yeah, it's 8:45. I hadn't anticipated adjourning this quickly, but we can. But is anyone in the public, again, understanding you have 3 minutes, and when you come back on the 26th, your commentary will be limited to just any new information that's presented on the 26th, but you're welcome to get up now. If you want to get up, Chair will recognize you. You have to be sworn in, and I'll run my stopwatch and ask you to wrap it up at 3 minutes. So does anyone want to speak tonight, or do you want to wait? Way in the back. Before you get going, let me get my stopwatch.
Okay. I don't know if my voice will last that long anyway.
First, you can be sworn in.
Okay. I do. Julie Natalizia, N as in Nancy, A-T-A-L-I-Z-I-A. Thank you very much. So, again, my name is Julie Natalizia, and I live at 500 Old Boston Neck Road, and I appreciate your time tonight. I have a letter, I've dropped off a letter from my husband, who is out of the country, but as an engineer, he's very precise and wordy, and so I'm going to be able to make this shorter than the 3 minutes than he would have taken. So our property abuts the proposed development to the south, and we want to state our opposition to the project, not based on the fact that it's affordable housing, but the impact that it's going to have on our neighborhood. Mike points out in his letter, my husband Michael, points out in his letter, there's 2 items that I believe that you can consider when you're bringing this, thinking about this project. One is the environmental impacts, and one is the impact on the health, safety, residents of the community, and the preservation of the natural, historical, and cultural features of our area. And I know the developer will probably spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to mitigate as much of it, but I don't believe that they can possibly overcome the enormous impact this is going to have between the buildings. The wetland, the wildlife, the water leading all the way to Narragansett Bay will be impacted, I believe, by such density. And the second point really, I guess, probably hits closer to home for me. Old Boston Neck Road is a narrow road. It's used by walkers, bikers, horses, and runners daily. It's already busy. Adding 20 new homes and the people that come with it will only add to the congestion. And I urge you to consider the preservation of our community. This beautiful area is home to some of the, I'm sorry, I talked too fast. The beautiful home, the area is filled with beautiful homes that date back in time. And, you know, I think that we all bought our homes in that area because of it. And to change this, it will change this farm like open space. You can never take it back once it's there. So again, it's not, my husband actually did the calculations about affordable housing. It increases at about 0.04%. So it's not going to solve the problem of affordable housing. I work on Block Island. They've done a lot of work out there. That's a great model to follow. I don't believe this is the one that is going to help the affordable housing issue. So I hope you consider that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Like you said, she submitted something more extensive in writing that will be passed out to the board members and both attorneys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Okay, anyone else? Anyone else wants to speak tonight, or do you want to wait? Before we go on, Mike, just as a point of clarification, Mr. Pimentel made and I don't want to, maybe I misinterpreted it, or maybe I didn't understand it, but the current 3 R80 parcel, we went through a subdivision recently, correct?
Of this property?
Yeah, within
Yeah.
the last
Yes,
3,
we did.
4 years, maybe?
That's,
7
it's
years?
up on the screen now. 2019, we divided it in two. The southern half with the existing farmhouse was sold.
Right.
And then the northern half with the vacant land, as described by Mr. Prive, was brought through they submitted a 3-lot subdivision to us, but they never brought it all the way to final, so it never went on record.
But, okay, so the point I'm getting, and again, I may have misinterpreted Mr. Pimentel's position, but this is not just historical. We actually spent a lot of time on what was appropriate for that area, right? When Mr. Kenyon came to us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well,
If I may.
Wait, can he ask us questions?
I'm asking my question.
Can we answer?
This is a historical fact.
Can we
That's all
answer?
I'm saying.
Can we,
Well, there are many facts
can we
that
answer?
fill in on that, too. Yeah,
Can-
of course.
all right.
Of course.
Go ahead. Thank you.
All
Go
I'm
ahead, Mike.
asking is, did we not spend a lot of time ruminating on what the appropriate density was for that area when the subdivision came in?
When the previous subdivision came in, of course we did. We looked at, first of all, that it's a 2-acre zone. We knew that it didn't have, this particular parcel did not have access to the sewer system. The water line on Old Boston Neck Road terminates something like 700 to 800 feet south of the very southern part of this property. There was question about whether or not the water line coming in through the back was going to be usable for the 3 lots, and that never got resolved. But we did know that the farmhouse, the existing farmhouse, could use it because it was using it. So if you recall, the fire marshal had some grave concerns about having hydrant available to the area. So, to
So
their
the
credit-
existing conditions were all taken into account.
Yeah,
So my only point is
Correct.
that-
So one of the issues back then, and it might be solved now, was North Kingston, if you remember, the North Kingston Town Council person owns one of the properties, and North Kingston wouldn't let Narragansett
Use the
use
fire
the fire hydrant, even though, because it was a foot in North Kingston or something like that. So there was an issue, but it looks like they're solving that somehow.
So do you want to comment on that, Mr. Doherty?
No, I think I'll bring some evidence in the next one.
That's fine. Thank you. So does anyone else, again, no one, they want to wait till Wednesday? Okay. Bring your coffees on Wednesday, folks. We'll be here a long night. So unless anybody in the board has any questions, this would be a good time to ask any of the expert witnesses anything they might want to know. We're not obviously moving towards decision tonight. We're just fact-finding. If anybody has anything. Anyone on the
I
board?
guess maybe for the
Steve?
engineer or for Mr. Doherty. So the water line comes through the railroad easement. Who owns that? Is that an abandoned railroad easement, or?
We have an easement. I'll be presenting certified copies from the land evidence records along with the chain for that.
Yeah, because the documents that we have in our file from John Kenyon that were given to Tom Santilli were parcels A, B, and C, and they were unsigned, so right, we have those.
There's recorded easements
Yep.
chain all the way back.
Will we get those before the next meeting?
Sure, yeah, I'll present them to you before that, sure.
Mike, did you have any comments? I mean, I know you have, we'll get to a lot, but was
Got
there any
15 pages of
question,
it.
anything that you need clarified by any of the expert witnesses that maybe
No, I
wasn't clear?
perfectly understood Mr. Privé's presentation, Mr. Tuig's presentation also. It was interesting to hear that he had done that work recently, and I'd like to see it. I'd also like to see the CRMC's response to it, so that it could be verified. As you know, that was one of the concerns I had, that pieces of information that I wanted to receive in order to certify completeness. It was not given. The soils, strike that. The water table information was another piece of information I would have liked to have. It seems as though they might have that, but we were mostly concerned with water tables in the vicinity of that large drainage basin, as well as in the vicinity of one of the 3 OWTSs, which didn't show on the plans. So, of course, I would like to have that information so that I could say to you that I feel the application is complete. As you know, I'm on the record as saying it is not.
So, and can you make sure that Mr. Doherty, just to make sure that we all have this one-page financial pro forma that I want to ask questions about, just make sure that everybody's got the right thing.
You've all got it.
We
It's in
have
your
it, but
packet.
Mr. Doherty was talking about something, he was talking about the fiscal impact study. This is a different,
No, that was also in your packet.
right, but I want to make sure Mr. Doherty has it.
The fiscal impact statement from Mr. Lombardo was in your packet.
No, perhaps I'm not clear.
Okay,
This,
yeah, that is not the fiscal impact
I
statement.
know.
That
I
is
wanna
the
make sure
financial pro forma.
Mr. Doherty has this, because I'm not sure, it seemed that he did.
It was attached it was an attachment to the Rhode Island Housing Letter of Eligibility.
So if you don't have that, staff has it. Okay. All right, I have a question, so. Sir, did you want to?
You want to give us the subject matter of your question? We'll be
No, not yet. I'm just,
Don't want to let us know what you're interested in so we can present the information to you at the next hearing?
everybody will understand what we're all interested in at the next hearing.
Well,
so.
I'd just like the opportunity to address the board's concerns, and if you have one right now, I'd love to hear it so that I could be adequately prepared and present the right witness.
I
to go
kind of
ahead and
want to
get that.
walk through it at the next meeting.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
And you can always agree to a continuance if you can't
Right.
get the answer to us.
Well, you know, I just, I'm trying to serve the needs of providing information to the board. And if the board would let me know a little bit more in advance rather than springing it on me at the next meeting,
Well, according
that
to
would be
one of
helpful.
according to one of your letters, you were holding back information that would allow you to present it tonight.
No. According to our letter as well, and I would just like to make this one comment.
Mr. Doherty, this
There's a-
board has been forthcoming with you every time you get up there.
No,
You know that.
I appreciate that, but some of the comments by the planner, Mr. DeLuca, fly in the face of Rhode Island General Laws 4553-4A1. And it doesn't require the level
Okay.
of substantiveness in the documentation that were presented in order to have an application deemed complete.
It's already something I've decided that we're not going to debate that anymore unless you can grant a further extension. We're going to make a decision by the end of the 26th. I don't think that's in the best interest of everyone, but we will do it because I do not want this to go to default approval. So much of that is in your hands. Do with it what you will. Okay.
There's a guy who wants a
Yeah, did you want to take your 3 minutes, sir? Come on up, you got to be sworn in.
I want to ask.
Yes. William Yandel, Y-A-N-D, William
Willie Yando, Y-A-N-D-O-W. I just had a question on whether February is the appropriate time to do the survey for wetlands, and if we could request by the 26th that the area where the so-called holding pond is going to be can be also reviewed, as you questioned, sir? And the land, or the wetlands expert said that he didn't even go down there. So if we could have him go complete his job, it would be appreciated.
Thank you.
So obviously, people can't ask the witnesses direct questions. but
Correct.
They can certainly suggest questions to the board. The board can then, if you wish, ask any of the experts, any of the questions.
Right, well, from staff's perspective, is that something that would reasonably be done at this stage?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, this is the time of year now that wetland and water table information is reliable. We didn't have a hard winter, but when we do have hard winters, the ground freezes. So it's pretty hard to figure out what you got. And I'm no wetland professional, but I think Mr. Tuig would agree with me on that. With that said, Mr. Tuig stated that he did not go to the area of the detention basin because he was primarily researching the wetland components of the site. You may want to ask him to come back up to the podium and to ask if he feels comfortable doing the soils analysis and the water table analysis also, or if there's someone else at Deep Creek Engineering who could handle that.
Mr. Tuig, you're already sworn in, I guess, right?
Yep. So just to address performing delineation during the winter, using soils as a criteria for identifying wetlands, those features are present any time of year. So that can be done. And as you said, if it is frozen, that makes it more difficult. But with the easy winter that we had, I was able to easily sample the soil. In terms of the detention basin area, again, I was verifying an existing wetland line that had already been submitted and had apparently expired. I performed a general site walk on the rest of the site. I didn't see anything that would warrant further sampling, especially considering that we already knew that we had witness testing in parts of the farm field that had 18-inch water tables, which under most circumstances would never support wetland vegetation.
I think my concern is different from the questioner, Mr. Yando's question. My concern has to do with the viability of that large area that's being targeted for a detention basin. If it has an 18-inch water table, certainly you can only put so much water into it because below the water table is water. So,
right, so that would
it has to be sized in a manner such that it would fulfill the
Good evening.
the needs for that.
So
I'll let you go, Mr.
Eric Prevey, DePreet Engineering, civil engineer. I think that's more of an engineering question than a wetland question. That's why I figured I'd answer it. But
very good, thank you.
Especially at a master plan level, I mean, I haven't seen in my experience of putting soil testing in direct locations of conceptual basins on master plans.
I was asking for water table information.
Understood, understood. But there was also a question from the public of, could we sample that area? That was the question also. So I'm just trying to be open to everything here. So we hadn't sampled directly in every single basin area. We hadn't. And that is, I think we've mentioned this from the very beginning. It needs to proof out at preliminary plan stage. It needs to. We need to show that the stormwater works. We need to show that the septic system can work. The engineering stage is at the preliminary plan stage. We understand that. That is the appropriate time to do it. So soil testing, we are going to meet. We're not asking for any waivers from any of the state standards. We're going to show that the testing works there and that we have the proper separations to the groundwater table for any, you know, if what we're putting our basins, all of that. We're not asking for waivers for any of that. So we will be sure to make sure that we're dotting all I's and crossing all T's of any locations of where they go. We happen to have some approved testing from DEM's verified from that subdivision that we were talking about. There was a 3-lot subdivision. There was some verified test holes as well. I'd be hard pressed to find and do soil testing in every conceptual basin or every conceptual area next to each unit and such at a master plan stage. I just haven't seen in my professional opinion, I haven't seen that at a master plan stage previously. So.
Mike?
There was a memo in December from the town engineer raising this question. It's April.
Sure.
Okay, that's all.
We'd be happy to provide at the appropriate stage at preliminary plan stage. We'll be happy
Okay.
to.
Got it, got it. Ma'am, now you want to speak? Come on up. I have a question, yes. You need to be sworn in.
Sure. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last.
Barbara Mariconda, M-A-R-I-C-O-N-D-A. So I'm new to all of this. I've never been at one of these meetings before. And my question is, it seems as though this meeting next week is coming up kind of quickly, and it seems to me that as sort of an alliance of neighbors who are not necessarily familiar with this process, it seems as though this requirement for this meeting next week and to have to speak in light of all of these experts who have clearly had a lot of time to get their ducks in a row, it seems to me an awful lot of pressure put on those of us who are going to be affected by this the most, when it seems as though, why do we need to rush this? Why couldn't we take a little bit more time so that we could meet with our attorney, we could speak to our experts, and have the same kind of consideration that this group has here? And I don't know if that's a reasonable question, but it seems reasonable to me.
Thank you. No, it is reasonable. We have a dispute. Do you want to address it, Mr. Marcel? I'd be glad to.
So no matter, the statute allows, once something's certified complete, that we have to complete the process within 90 days. So there's a limited period of time, no matter what. It's not the defense of the applicant, but because the notice was incorrect, there kind of has been a 30-day continuance for that process, for the re-notification. However, it's my opinion that the board, after hearing all the testimony, should make a decision within that statutory period of time. So it is quick. However, the law's there for a reason, because in the past, planning boards, not necessarily this one, would continue and continue and continue, and developers and whoever, it would take 6-9 months to get an approval. So the state law is pretty clear that we have 90 days to move forward. There's a dispute where the 90 days starts. However, to avoid that dispute, the chair's made a decision to make sure that all the testimony is heard and all the comment is heard, and that we make a decision at next week's meeting.
Because if we...
I'd be glad to speak with you after, but come
No,
up.
no, you have to come up, man.
You have to come
You have
up.
to come up.
This is all being recorded. so
Okay.
It can't ever be protected.
It might be helpful to explain the steps in this.
I'm not here to do that. She has an attorney, and I'd be glad to speak with anyone individually. However, I'm not here for a seminar on affordable housing.
Okay, so I just want to go on record as saying that it seems as though the developer has an unfair advantage in this regard. That's
Okay.
just what I want to say.
Okay, and understand, I've made a decision that we're going to make a decision by next Wednesday, because if we don't, and the dispute falls in the favor of those that say the clock started ticking here, then this whole thing approves by default. And I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to We're going to make a decision up and down on master plan based on the decision, the feelings of these 4 people here, and then we're going to go to the next stage. I'm not going to let it go to default. I wish we had more time too. That's why I told everybody to bring their coffee, because I don't have any other choice. Unless all parties say, yeah, we can kick it another month. But until that happens, we have to render the decision. I'm not going to take the chance that we lose this dispute as to timeline. So it's the way it is. Yes, ma'am. All of a sudden, people want to talk. They didn't want to talk. Now they want to talk.
Come on up, you all.
You have to be sworn in.
I do. Julia Sharp, Sharpe. It's interesting because none of us are making comments, we're asking questions. So my question is, you're talking about a decision next week. Can you clarify for all of us, because you're talking about, I mean, what is the decision that you are going
It's a
to
good
make?
question.
And what are the consequences? Because I'm hearing that the engineering of this
Right.
isn't done, the engineering of that, and I've read that the fire marshal has questions, the planning director has questions, the engineering department has questions. So can you give us an idea of what
Yep.
the timeline is?
It's a good point. I would ask Mr. DeLuca to explain quickly master plan, preliminary plan, and to me, it's counterintuitive, but it's the state law, so.
And what?
Yep.
and-
Could we also request, for purposes of addressing concerns and standing, that people give their addresses, so at least we know whereabouts they're located in proximity to this?
Can we do that?
We can, we never have, so it's, you know,
Narragansett.
anyone has the right to speak.
No, the reason being is we went far and wide with our butters notices, and some of the people are outside of the 500 foot.
Okay.
And there were also notices as a result of, and I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm not disparaging you in any way.
He's not.
But in order to, we had to serve the entirety of Riverdale condominiums there
Right.
a mile away, because there was a slice of a wetland in the front on Boston Neck Road that the condominium association owned. And we had the same sort of thing in North Kingstown, where there was a conservation lot that was within the radius of
Okay.
for people that are down on the Narrow River. So,
But anyone can comment, whether they're in your butters or not.
yeah,
Right.
but we also, as developers and trying to be responsible, we'd also like to deal with the people that are most impacted by this, to see if we can further away any of their concerns.
Okay.
So, someone doesn't have to, if they want to, they can give their address.
Okay,
There's
can-
no legal reason.
Can we get a 30,000 feet of master plan preliminary from one of you two gentlemen?
Yeah.
So hopefully this will answer your question.
All right.
Go ahead, Mike.
So
Yep.
this is the short course in subdivision development review. Following should I start with 1992? It was a subdivision.
No, just the process.
I'm only
The
kidding. I'm only kidding. The state law as it is today, and it's for all developments, subdivisions, land developments, and even comprehensive permit for affordable housing developments, involves a four-part process. And the first part was pre-application, and it's required, particularly for comprehensive permits, it is required that a pre-application be held with the planning board. If it was not a comprehensive permit, the pre-application is optional. And pre-application
Excuse me, Mike, real quick.
was
The
held.
comprehensive permit involves affordable units.
And a comprehensive permit
Just so
allows.
you, this isn't just a subdivision, it's a subdivision with affordable units.
Correct.
Okay, sorry. Okay, it's not a
It's a-
subdivision. It's a comprehensive permit application for affordable housing.
This isn't going to be a quick
Yeah.
definition, folks.
30,000 feet, we're already at 80,000 feet. Go ahead.
I was going to bring all that in. Just give me a couple of minutes.
All right.
See, they're afraid I'm going to talk really long, because that's what I do sometimes. But no, truthfully, a comprehensive permit, which is this application, has to have at least 25% of the housing units dedicated and deed restricted as affordable housing under the state definition, which involves a subsidy. The reason that they're coming into the comprehensive permit application is that they can ask for density relief, and that this board is empowered under the state law to grant relief that is normally under the purview of the zoning board. So it creates a one-stop shop, so to speak. But to the more general question, a pre-application has to be had with the planning board for a comprehensive permit and affordable housing development. That was done in February last year, I believe. Pre-application is a discussion. There's almost no paperwork involved except for a schematic layout of the development plan. And it's an open-ended discussion. It was really well done. The applicant and the board trade questions and answers, so they each know where each other is coming from. They had questions, these folks had questions, they answered them. So then, once that was done, the next step is the master plan, and the master plan is a conceptual plan stage. Mr. Doherty described that earlier. It is intended and was put in the subdivision enabling law back in 1992 at the request of the development community to establish a certain vesting of development rights. So, such that once that plan, the master plan, is reviewed and approved, the number of dwellings that have been approved have to be allowed unless there's a reason to take some out. And what is not required at master plan is any full-scale engineering or permitting. We do have informational requirements. I already stated, and I won't get into it in any detail, there was some information I wanted that was not provided, but the applicant feels as though that wasn't necessary. So the decision, to answer the question, is, wherever that question came from, is that would a master plan with the conceptual layout of this development as we have had it presented here to us tonight, is that acceptable to this board such that more advanced engineering and permitting and design can be brought forward in the next stage of review called preliminary. And at preliminary, there's a full-blown public hearing. This is an informational hearing. We conduct them the same way. We have Alicia here doing our stenography, and we keep track of every single word that everyone says. In both informational hearing, as tonight, and at preliminary hearing next time, at the next stage. So the preliminary hearing, we would get full technical data on every single one of those detention basins. We would get full technical data on the engineering and design of that driveway. It's not a road, it's a driveway. We'd have all permits, and we would not have all permits in hand. Under state law, the state wetland permits are not required until final design. If it were not a comprehensive permit, the state permits, if we're not an affordable housing development being brought forward under the comprehensive permit law, all state permits would have to be in hand at the preliminary stage. So, and at final design, the planning board will review essentially all the final documents. There will be condominium documents, there will be homeowners association documents. There might be a bond for the cost of constructing that road and other infrastructure. There may be other elements that would be put in before them for the final review. At final review, there is not a public hearing. There is no notification to the abutters. I think that's it.
And once master plan, if it's approved, we go to preliminary. If the applicant doesn't meet all the standards of preliminary with their technical submission, then it doesn't go any further at that point. But this is a very crucial stage because it does vest a number of units.
Correct.
And it's obviously important. It's not just informational. I mean, it's a key element, obviously. Do you have a question, ma'am?
Yes. Anna McGreen, McGreen. I live right down the street, stone's throw away. I'm on Old Boston Neck Road. I did not get any notification. I think most of the people here did not get any kind of notification. What I'm hearing a lot of about tonight is all the information on the lot. What I'm not hearing is anything about Old Boston Neck Road. This is not a through road. Trucks aren't allowed to go down here. The sides are soft, there's gullies and water. If you were to pull over to the side, your wheels would go down and you need a tow truck to get you out. What is going up and down this road on a daily basis, because I live on the side of that road and I see it, is elderly people walking, babies pushed in a carriage, children on their bikes, just everyone out there. It's a walkway. It's not a through truck. It's not a through road. The amount of cars that this development would bring would almost double what's coming from the neighborhood. And I'm just wondering, is there any kind of studies that are required for you to make your decisions? Is this part of it, or is it all about the studies on the lot?
Traffic study is coming next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I won't be here.
I believe it's a matter of public record, and so you could get a copy from the staff if you wanted to review it ahead of time.
And who does this traffic study
Well,
here?
the applicant has an
The
engineer.
applicant has an engineer.
And then our staff looks at it, and there's still a provision that the board could ask for a second review by a peer. If that was the case, that's permitted in our ordinance. So it all depends on what it shows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for your time. Okay. I appreciate that, Mike, that explanation. Hopefully that clarified it. Like I said, it's counterintuitive, but it is what it is for me. So I think if there's nothing else, I think we're going to continue till the 26th at 6 p.m. Do I have a motion to continue?
Move to continue.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye. And a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Seconded, non-debatable.
All those approved?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, folks. Appreciate you coming.